is going to have to be the quote-unquote religion of tomorrow. If it isn't, you're fucked. Totally and absolutely.
Very attractive for people who want to start businesses and people who have, that entrepreneurial farmer spirit. This shit's going to be multiple billions of dollars in industry over the next few years. No doubt about that. Everybody's going to be making money at every angle. The people who sell modified combines, you know what I'm saying, to harvest, the people who make greenhouses, the people who make the plastic that covers the greenhouses, everybody gonna be getting money off hemp. And then and eventually cannabis because that's right behind. They can't have everybody growing CBD and still force them to not grow THC cannabis. So the future is opening up. It's looking pretty bright right now. And hemp licenses are free in Florida right now. So your boy is going to get fingerprinted tomorrow so I can put in my paperwork and get a hemp license on my property since I'm already on agricultural land. It's a no-brainer. A
Well done.
nice, respectable, slow clap.
Well done.
Yeah, man. I got to do it, bro. It's just such a, it's literally, like I said, it's a no-brainer. I mean, fuck. It's a free license. I already got land I can grow on. It's a beautiful cash crop, and the strains that they found that perform the best in Florida right now is a 4 month crop. 4 months, bro, and you can be. I mean, selling it won't be a problem. All these true leaves, all these people who are looking for CBD to make tinctures and extractions and all of that, they're gonna need it from somewhere. So even with a small operation, even if I only grow a couple, 100 pounds or something like that, I'm sure I'll find a place to sell it, no problem.
It
Shit is
doesn't take
looking good.
much, right?
No, it's a super easy grow. Especially, I mean, we've been on the farmer vibe for the last 6 years anyway. We've been building our soil. We've been learning about the cycles and permaculture, and that's something that's kind of missing from the cannabis conversation. Also, is permaculture. So while I was up there yesterday, I met a bunch of guys who are big money dudes who've been doing this a long time, from the people who kind of just pay to have the project to get the project going to the actual farm managers and growers. Like it's a lot of people involved. And my homeboy's like, yeah, this is my man. He lives in Pasco County. He's got a permaculture farm at his house. Everybody's eyes lit up. They fucking got big. It was like, oh, you do permaculture? So permaculture being introduced into cannabis growing is a huge conversation. And I'm like, that's our niche right there. We don't have to be a huge farm right off the back. We could just focus on some permaculture boutique shit. You know what I mean? Some high end, very closely manicured. And just when it's a small operation, that's kind of what you pay for it too, is because it's not just some cold, sterile thing. These are a family growing their shit. I might throw some metaphysics in there. We might do some Reiki on the plants, some full moon guided meditation right before the harvest. Throw all that shit in there. That just raises the price tag. You know what I'm saying?
Explain what permaculture is.
Permaculture is what people have developed over a long, long time as an alternative to commercial agriculture. So in commercial agriculture, whereas they would just automatically go into the chemicals and tilling of the soil and doing all of this stuff that is over time been proven to be objectively destructive. So you're going to need to do more and more work and buy more and more chemicals year after year after year because you're depleting the soil rather than putting nutrients and everything back into it. So with permaculture, the focus on one of the main focuses is not tilling and leaving the soil to be layered with biomass, whether it's fodder from the plants that you chop up or mulch or anything like that that would keep the soil covered, protect the fungal biome and the microorganisms and everything, and basically a system that would feed itself and sustain itself over long periods of time without having to add outside chemical fertilizers and pesticides because of what's known as biodiversity. Instead of having 10 acres of one plant, which is asking for a disaster, because if any type of fungus or pest comes in there, it'll destroy the whole thing. You have a diverse family of things from the ground cover all the way up to the canopy trees that brings in beneficial insects. It kind of just protects you from some of the disasters that can happen So yeah, permaculture is definitely the future. It's just a more mindful way to treat gardening. I mean, I don't know if realistically right now, permaculture, a full permaculture practice could sustain the need that we have to feed people, but it would definitely slow down the degradation of the soil if commercial farmers started to incorporate permaculture tactics over time and to learn and instead of just doing what they're doing now, because what they're doing now is destroying shit. This is terrible.
But don't you have to till the soil in order to plant seeds?
No. So tilling the soil, and there's a bunch of documentaries and stuff that explain this and illustrate it. They even have some footage from back in the day. So what tilling the soil does, when you till the soil and you get this boost of life from it because it breaks everything up and it makes it the soil the soil texture in a way that the roots can grow easily. But the reason that the soil is all compressed in the first place is because they've cut everything down, they've killed all the roots. They don't use ground covers, which are all types of grasses and clovers and other young vegetables like radishes and peas, things that you might not necessarily be harvesting for the fruit or the crop itself, but you can create biomass. So if you grow a bunch of rye grasses and clover, right before it flowers, you chop it all down and you leave it exactly where you chopped it. That's called chop and drop. And what that does is, for one, it keeps the soil covered and protected from the elements. It also puts everything that was taken out of the soil, it gives it a chance to be incorporated back into the soil. It helps with carbon sequestration because we're losing a lot of carbon because of the way we're farming. So this puts it back into the soil, and over time, the texture of the soil becomes lighter and fluffier because it's not just compressed dirt. There's little chopped up bits of wood and grass and leaves and all of that stuff. It mixes itself in because the microorganisms, the worms, they till the soil under the top layer for you. If there's enough food and activity and life in the soil, they'll do all the tilling for you. But after years and years and years of chopping everything down, the soil gets compacted. So when you till it, you get a boost of growth. It looks like a boost of growth, but the reason for that is because hundreds and hundreds of billions of microorganisms got killed by being exposed to the light and everything. So when you plant, the plant's like, oh, this is nice. There's billions of dead bodies in here. But this is obviously not the thing you want to be doing every year. So when they used to till soil years ago, thousands of birds would show up to eat the worms and the bugs and all the stuff that was in the soil. When you till the soil now, the birds don't even show up because they know there's nothing in there. You know what I mean? So even nature knows this is dead soil.
So tilling is when you're basically removing all other plant life out from the soil in preparation
Right.
to plant the crop. Okay,
Which
so
is
no,
terrible.
so isn't grass like a weed? Wouldn't that choke the crops that you're trying to plant in it?
No, that's the thing. The grass is the root, having a live root in the ground feeds the fungal network and the microorganisms in the soil. It also digs holes, tiny little holes in the ground that allows water to seep down and follow the path of the roots. So that's how you get more water below the surface rather than getting runoff. So you grow the grass to cover the soil, to feed microorganisms, also to feed the wildlife, to feed, it brings in beneficial insects, all of that stuff. And like I said, it's a diverse mix. It's not just the grass. And
Right.
these things, right when you're ready to plant, you would be cutting that down and leaving it in place as mulch, and then you plant directly into that soil right there with the grass as cover. That's going to melt down and give you nitrogen and all kind of other nutrients into your soil, and the matted dead grass is going to block any other weeds from coming up. So it's just
Mm.
a objectively better practice because you don't have to spray pesticides, you don't have to spray weed killer Roundup on the ground or carry those big things with the torches and shit that scorch everything. You
But
don't have
don't
to
you
do
have to
that.
plant the seed in the soil? Wouldn't you have to dig up the grass to put it in there? So if you're cutting the grass and then leaving that grass basically to mulch in to what's already there, you're saying you just put the seed right on top of
No,
that
you would
first
dig
layer?
a hole. You would not dig a
Okay,
hole, but you would create a little crater for the seed, but you wouldn't
gotcha,
have to till the entire property. You make a little
gotcha.
crater for the seed. You put the seed right there. And remember, you're cutting the grass off at the top instead of tilling. So when you cut the grass off at the top like that, the root dies. But if you think about what a root looks like, it's like a tree basically upside down. So
Hmm.
all of those little holes actually aerate and separate the soil. So it's not compacted. So
Mm.
when you plant the seed in there, the soil is not going to be the same way it would have been after those commercial farming techniques. Because I've done it here. Once you dump the mulch down and the chop and chop grass down, it just kind of fluffs up everything for that top layer. You take a little hand trowel or whatever. I'm on a bigger operation, of course, it'd be something else. But a little hand trowel, you dig a tiny little circle, turn a little bit, and you put the seed right there. It's got its own mulch. It's got its own nitrogen leaking into it. It's got the ground cover is helping the weeds from stopping the weeds from growing. And everything that the grass and the ground cover had taken from the soil in that period is going back into it.
So walk me through what the steps would be. So if I went out into my backyard right now, I don't dig up all the grass. I just
Right.
cut the grass down and then leave those grass clippings to kind of melt back into the soil.
Basically. But what I would say
Okay.
for your first year, what I would do is you find a supplier who's going to give you what's called a ground cover mix. So I have some, I put some on my soil recently. So the
Hmm.
ground cover mix is going to consist of rye grasses, which are a better grass than what most of us have, sodded into our yards and shit now. So what I would do is cover the soil with something, whether it's mulch, leaves, all of the stuff that people try to get rid of. I
Hmm.
would cover the soil with that. Of course, you cut your grass, you cover the soil with that, and then you would throw your ground cover down. Or actually, you throw the ground cover first, then you cut the grass. The grass that you cut and the biomass that you put down would cover the ground, the seeds that you just threw, and help them germinate. So now you're going to have a diverse group of plants growing rather than just one grass covering your whole yard. You'll have radishes in there, you have clovers in there, all there are 3 or 4 different types of grasses, all kinds of stuff. Now that stuff is going to be feeding into your soil rather than just taking away from it. So when it's time for you to plant, whatever things you want to plant, you cut the ground cover back and then you make small little, little holes and you plant in those holes. Everything that you plant is going to come up. It might not do the greatest because it's your first year. You got to find the things that's going to work best for your native soil, of course. And it's just a process, a process that you do over time. You just keep cutting and adding to the soil. Where I live at now, I've been mulching and doing this shit so long, you'd have to dig down over almost a foot to get to native Florida soil. So I've raised the level of my property a foot or more in most places with just biomass, humus, dark mulch that's breaking down, and it's beautiful. And then of course you get to the Florida sand and you're like, what is this shit?
Right.
But yeah, it works. It just works. You just have to put time into it. And I understand, commercial farming and shit doesn't really have time to lose. They fuck themselves over so bad they can't afford to do it in one big motion. But at the very least, instead of tilling the soil and instead of killing everything, farmers should be growing cover crops in between the cycles of the food crops, the cash crops that they grow, because then it would make it so they would need less fertilizer when it's time to grow their actual cash crops because of the biomass and the nutrients that chopping back the cover crop would add to the soil.
Mm.
So even on a home scale, I got my cover crop. I found it at one of the feed stores, and it was on sale too because it was at the end of the. What I use for cover crop is what hunters use to attract deer. So they grow these food plots to attract the deer, then they shoot the deer while it's eating. I just use it because it's a really extremely diverse group of seeds, and it's hard to find that kind of shit in a 50-pound bag. You know what I'm saying? So this is it's perfect. It's perfect. You can grow. I've done it with radishes. I've done it with beans, peas, all kinds of stuff. Anything that'll grow that you can broadcast and just throw out in large amounts, it'll grow. It'll grow, and it just helps whatever you do next. Even if you cut your grass and you leave your grass clippings exactly where they are, feed everything back into the soil. And over time, if you're not putting chemicals, the shit in there to make your grass look nice, if you're not putting all that in there, you're going to be perfect. Perfect. You'll surprise yourself at how easy you can grow most stuff, especially tomatoes. Tomatoes don't give a shit. They'll grow in damn near anything, and you can't stop them once you got them. The
And the grass
seeds,
doesn't grow through and break through everything else that you've laid on top of it?
no,
Mm,
no, because
okay.
when you cut it back, it's the matting of everything. Like if you would have cut your grass and you had a lawnmower that collected the grass clippings, or if you raked them all up and like got rid of
Mhm.
them, that grass would grow back a lot stronger than if you would have just left the grass clippings on the ground, because they mat and it kills a lot of the stuff underneath it. So if you just
Mm.
clear out the spot that you want to put your tomato plant, everything else around it is going to have a much harder time growing than the tomato plant. And then we use mulch around the plants too. So I mulch around my with straw. I take stuff from the chicken coop. When the chicken coop is dirty, I take all of that, shovel all of that out. I put it in a little pile so it can compost. I mulch that around the tops of my plants. Mulch is the most powerful thing you can use in the garden, because it's a natural ground cover that makes it very, very difficult for stuff underneath it to grow, stuff that you don't want growing and competing with your plants. But it also composts down and feeds the soil. It feeds the microorganisms and the fungus in the soil, which helps your plants grow. So it's just every way you look at it, mulch is the key. If you have soil that's too dry, too sandy, and doesn't hold water, mulch gets mixed into there, and those wood chips decompose over time. They break up the sand. They give the sandy soil more body. It gives it more biomass, and it also retains water. If your soil is too compact and too wet and too muddy, you put the wood chips on it. It aerates the soil, and it changes the body of it, so it makes it so that it drains better. So whatever problem on whatever extreme your land is going through, the mulch remedies the problem. Either way, no matter which direction your issue is in, the mulch helps.
This is good because I think especially ignorant, and I think my ignorance probably represents the majority of people. That if you propose something like this right out of the gate, they would be clueless.
Right.
So, let me reflect back to you the steps, and you let me know where I got it wrong. Um, so basically, first you would cut the grass.
Well,
You
if you have
don't.
ground cover, you would throw the ground cover first.
So you okay? So if you got grass already there,
Yeah.
you're saying don't dig up all the grass and have the soil. Just cut the grass and leave the grass trimmings there on
Right.
top of it, and eventually, it'll kind of create a mat that will naturally prevent grass from growing up. But then you would
Right.
want to put something on top of that, right?
Right. Yeah.
Which is
Something
what you were
that's
talking about, the ryegrass, the
right.
radishes.
Yeah.
Okay, and
Right.
you're saying there's a mix that you can buy of just those seeds, and you would literally just drop them down right onto the grass clippings
Yeah. Well, I would put it. I would. The reason I would throw the ground cover first is because
before you
that
cut the
way,
grass.
yeah, that way
Okay.
those ground cover seeds are touching the ground. Then you cut the grass, and that grass covers those seeds, which helps them germinate.
Okay.
And it stops the birds from eating them because they can't find them. So it's like make a little sandwich between your ground, the seeds, and then all the cut grass clippings and whatever else you can find, whether it's leaves or straw.
Right.
If you can get straw from somewhere, if you can get a tree company to come deliver mulch for you, anything you can put down over that is going to help.
Okay.
Yeah, and then you just make, instead of tilling everything up, you figure out where you're going to plant it all at, where your rows or whatever, however you're going to do it, and you just make a hole big enough to plant just that seed. And all you're doing is giving it a good start so the roots can spread out. But once it hits everything else, it's going to be fine. And then you mulch directly over your beds around your plants, and it gives it a little bit more blockage. It holds moisture so you won't have to water it as much.
So once all these beans and radishes and ryegrasses start growing, those are things you're saying you wouldn't necessarily harvest those. You would just let those sprout and then decay right back into the soil.
Right. I mean, you don't
Okay.
have to. Over time, that's what they would do. I would even let some of them
Right.
flower because they drop their own seeds. And eventually you have radishes growing wild on your property. But think about how a radish grows. You know what I'm saying? especially
I
a
have no
daikon.
idea how a radish grows.
Well, there's something called a daikon radish, right?
Uh-huh.
So a daikon radish is this long white radish. All you see, it's like a carrot, basically. It grows just like a carrot. So it punches a hole down through your soil. So if you leave that there to live its entire life instead of pulling it out of the ground, if you leave that there to just live, make flowers, then die, it decomposes in the ground. It turns into a mushy black something that seems disgusting to us, but that's some of the most beautiful shit the microorganisms and the worms could ever ask for. They love it. So you bring in worms, and as the worm travels through your soil, it tills the soil for you. So it changes the structure of your soil just by traveling through it to get to the food. Also, when it rains, instead of your water running off somewhere, it will pool up in the cavity left by the radish. And that gets water deeper down into your soil around where your plants are going to be. And it's a beautiful fucking system. Nature got it all figured out. Who'd have thunk?
Mm.
Yeah, it's pretty dope. And if you leave them, like I said, if you leave them, they drop seeds. So eventually you have wild radishes growing. You can have wild cabbage growing, wild carrots, and stuff that you didn't even plant. But if you ever need to collect some food, you can go outside and grab some stuff.
Cool. Well, um, for the past month, I've taken under the arduous and back-breaking, laborious effort to dig up the yard, which now I see I did not have to do. So I thought the first step was just to dig up huge swaths of the yard. And it's not easy. I'm just
Oh,
out there with a shovel.
yeah.
Just out there with a shovel, driving into the ground like I'm burying somebody in Goodfellas.
Mm.
It's nature makes it easier than anything I think I envisioned in my head.
Right. Yeah, commercial farming has got us all screwed up. It makes us think it's the hardest, most backbreaking work you ever got to do. And it's just not true. It's not true. With the places that I choose to grow, what I have done sometimes is I'll dig out like where the walkways are. Like I might dig some extra dirt up from some places that I can add so I can raise some things up. So I'll move dirt around or I'll pile on extra mulch just to change the shape of the landscape because I try to build swales. So building swales is just to capture water. It's basically like just digging a tunnel through certain paths in a garden. So when it rains, instead of the water just sliding down the landscape, it'll get trapped in some of these tunnels, and then it just sits there and slowly seeps down into the ground. So you harvest water, so you don't have to water when it gets hot. When it gets hot, the wood chips. When I put wood chips in my garden, even if it hasn't rained for 2 weeks, if I just take my hand and get a handful of wood chips and slide them over to the side, it's soaking wet underneath the top layer. The top layer is dry. You know what I mean? But underneath that is soaking wet because it's been covered for so long. It's sort of sequestered all that moisture over the cold months and everything. So even if it doesn't rain, the plants are doing fine because their roots are getting down to the part that's still moist. And that's another thing. If your soil's not covered, you wick all the moisture out. When you mulch over things and you put bales of hay down and leaf clippings and all of that shit, it keeps it from wicking all the moisture out. So you actually don't, that's less time that you have to spend in the garden tending to it because it's watering itself.
So over all of this land I dug up, I should just let all of that grass just decay back into the dirt, and
Yeah.
then start layering some tree clippings, some
Yep.
leaves, anything I can
Anything.
find that's going to decompose over it. Probably take a dump in a cup and just throw it out there
That's
one or
that's
two
also
mornings a
valid.
week.
That's valid. We it's
And I think it'd be extremely fun just
yeah,
to go out
absolutely.
there like a madman, flinging my feces.
As long as your diet's good, you know what I'm saying? But
You know what? I might just go right hand to fist, or anus to fist, and just fling it out. Go
yeah, that's
completely
like a
primal.
real man. Like a real man.
Yeah,
Don't need none of that punk ass tissue.
that'd be a fun experience.
Dude, it's perfect, man. It's a perfect
I'd
system.
really
It's so
like to sit
simple.
here and tell you that I've never done that before.
Well, I'm just gonna let that rock.
I really, I'd really like to be able to tell you, as a grown adult man, I've never just pooped into my hand and flung it.
Listen,
But I can't tell you that.
there's got to be a reason for everything.
Yeah, of course.
I'm just gonna assume you had a really good reason.
No, your assumption would be wrong, sir.
But yeah, it's a powerful setup, man. I mean, once you see how it works, once you see the potential that it has and how little effort goes into growing good crops, and it's amazing. It's amazing. You just realize that they lied to you. But if they get you on the chemical fertilizers, you'll probably never want to go back. Because once you throw the miracle grow in that soil and you see that tomato come up and you're like, oh, it's so big and red and beautiful, you think you did the right thing. You put a couple shakes of Miracle Grow in there, you got dope tomatoes. Next year, you put the same amount of Miracle Grow in, but the tomatoes don't seem to be responding the same way. So you put a little bit more, and then they respond. You're like, oh, okay, I just need a little more. After about 5 or 6 years, you're gonna have to dump an entire fucking 25-pound bag of Miracle Grow in your soil to get the results that you got from a few shakes 5 years earlier.
And this, of course, reinforces my theory that the modern day economy is completely built on drug dealing. It's drug dealing economics.
Yeah, yeah, definitely,
You
100%.
gotta have more. Everything that's set up is so that you gotta have more of it.
Right, right, and
Yeah.
they know exactly what's happening because they use these salts, these crazy salts, to bind to the nutrients. So you're actually filling your soil up with salt,
And
and
stuff
once
can't grow in salt.
right, so once all the nutrients have been taken up by the plant and washed out of your soil, the only thing that's left is the salt
Salt
deposit.
deposits. Yep.
Yeah. And they know exactly what they're doing. So you need more and more fertilizer every year. Same with the farmers. They need more and more fertilizer every year. But
So
they don't see
if somebody wanted to get in on this and maybe, they don't have any land, right? They just maybe they're an apartment, maybe they got a back porch where they can have plants. I mean, I'm assuming if you had like obviously you wouldn't be able to have a whole operation, but you could start getting acquainted with the process and maybe having a big pot out on your back porch and utilizing those same techniques to make fertile soil for you to grow a crop or two.
right, definitely.
It's
All you
feasible.
have to do, yeah, all you'd have to do is start saving your vegetable clippings and your food waste. So if you got a back porch, you can use something like a cooler or one of those storage bins or something like that, a five gallon bucket. Start
So even if I took out like you cut the tips off of carrots,
yeah,
right? You take away the bushy part of the celery, you remove the corn from the husk. I could take all of those things and just dump them in the soil.
yes.
Okay.
Yes, I think the better thing to do, the more long-term thinking, you could
Uh-huh.
definitely dump them in the soil, which would help, or mix them up into the soil, chop them up good, mix them up into the soil that you're going to put your pot in, that you're going to
Okay.
pot in. But the thing is, it takes a while for those things to break down and for those nutrients that are left in there to become bioavailable for the plants to even suck it up.
Right.
So ahead of time, you get you a bucket or a storage bin or something like that. You start throwing all your vegetable clippings in there, and that would be the vegetable clippings are considered nitrogen or wet items. So they're going to turn into a slimy fucking mess if there's no
Right.
carbon to mix with it. So your carbon could be it could be dry leaves, it could be straw, it could be newspaper, technically, it could be cardboard,
And
anything
you
that
see that
soaks
when you
up.
leave the asparagus in the fridge too long. If you bought it in a bag and open up the bag,
Yeah,
I mean
yeah.
it's slime.
Right,
That's what
that's
you're
exactly
talking
what's going
about.
to happen.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly what's going to happen. So you don't want that. That creates what's called anaerobic bacteria because it's just wet and nasty and it stinks and nobody wants that. So as you have to add carbon materials in there to balance it out. The carbon helps soak everything up. It's anything that would be like brown and dry would help soak it up, and that's how you get compost. When the browns and the greens are mixed properly, those will compost down and become literal soil. If you mix it the right way and you leave it over time, you shake the bucket up and turn it over every a couple days, eventually you'll come to that bucket and there'll just be black soil in it. So you mix that into your pots and then you grow your veggies in there. You grow your tomatoes, cucumbers, all kind of stuff you can get away with growing in small spaces. But basically just start saving your food scraps and your garbage won't stink as much. The only thing that'll be in your garbage is your plastic containers and wrappings and, you know, all that kind of shit. Instead of scraping everything into the garbage, scrape it into your compost bucket. Now you got nutrients to grow your veggies in.
Mm.
You
Which
know, that's
seems way smarter.
oh yeah, absolutely. That's how we started. That's how we started. First, one some of the first things we started doing was saving vegetable clippings. And of course, we had chickens pretty early, so our chickens would eat it, and that was how we got a lot of eggs without buying too much chicken feed. Was because we were feeding chickens all our food scraps. Any of the meat scraps the dogs get, you know, the dog gets that. So we have a little system, but I also have a worm bin. I just feed the worm bin. I take food scraps in there. I got a bunch of leaf clippings and peat moss in there, and there's fucking hundreds of worms just living in it. And I feed them, and every now and then, every few months, I go into that bucket and I scoop out all of the basic, which is worm shit. They call it worm castings to be fancy, but you scoop out the worm shit, and that has insane amount of nutrients in it because it's passed through the worm's gut, and it's kind of a lot of microbacteria and shit in there, and that helps the plants. So I take that out to the garden and I feed that to the plants. So yeah, I fucking worms are helping me grow my food.
Now, how do you avoid an issue like with worms getting into your product?
Like what? What do you mean? Well, the worms stay beneath the soil.
Like you bite into an apple, it's got a worm in it.
Oh,
Is
that's
that a
different.
thing that happens?
No, that's not the same type of worm. You know that the
Okay.
worms that compost and live in the soil, they're not gonna like climb up the tree and start eating the apple. Those are caterpillars and shit. The different type of
Mm.
pest. You know what I'm saying? These
So
worms are
so
beneficial to the soil.
but wouldn't something be interested in eating a potato,
Oh yeah.
eating a stalk of corn? Okay, so how would you um essentially ensure that the stuff that you're putting down there, everybody's eating what they're supposed to? Like, look, you get the compost, you get the mulch. I'm gonna take these potatoes.
Biodiversity. So if you have, say, if you're growing corn, right? So you're growing corn and there's bugs that want to eat your corn. Outside of using, there are some things that I like to use that help with that, like just topically, something
Mm-hmm.
like neem oil. Neem oil comes from neem trees. They crush the leaves and they crush these things and they get the oil from it. And bugs, for one, they hate the smell of it. They don't like the pungent smell of it. So it kind of keeps them away. For two, if you put it in a sprayer and you spray it on the bugs, the oil in from the neem coats the bug's exoskeleton in a way where it stops them from being able to breathe right, absorb nutrients right, and it kills them. But it's a completely natural product. It's not a chemical. So also, I'm not just growing corn. I'm growing corn, I'm growing beans, I'm growing potatoes, I'm growing a whole bunch of stuff. So all of these flowers that are happening in my garden, my sunflowers, my all of this stuff, they're bringing in beneficial insects that want to eat the things that want to eat the corn. You know what I'm saying? So if you just have potatoes, the thing that likes to eat potatoes may not necessarily have a predator that also, you know, that just is attracted to the potato flower, but it might have something that's attracted to a sunflower that also likes to eat these bugs. So you just got to have a diverse system there, and everything kind of works itself out. I've had bugs get on my plants and eat my plants, and I was like, what the hell is going on? What eats these little white mites that are on my plants? Oh, ladybugs eat these. So what do ladybugs like? I found out what kind of flowers ladybugs like. I grow a bunch of those as much as I can. Now I got hundreds of ladybugs all over my garden, and ladybugs want nothing more in the world than to eat 500 spider mites a day. So instead of me going out there having to pick them off my plant, I bring in the ladybugs kill the spider mites.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean it's just it really is a simple system. And like I said, it's a trial and error thing. So commercial farmers don't have time to for trial and error. But if they understood the science and you know you can grow this type of flower to bring in ladybugs, you can grow this type of flower to bring in parasitic wasps, you can grow this type of flower to bring in lacewings. All of those three things I just named, they kill the pests that want to eat our food. You know what I'm saying? So if you have those naturally in the environment, they kill them. Also, I have a lot of fruit trees, a lot of things that are like stalk and scaffolding for birds. The birds love to come in here if they feel safe. You got enough fruit trees around, enough things that they can land on. They start to eat the bugs off your plants too. But the birds are not necessarily they may not
Interested
necessarily
in
eat
the
the peaches.
vegetables.
Like like they want to eat the insects. So you just make a place for them. Put some more bird feeders on your property. Grow some more trees where they feel safe hiding in the bushes. You know what I'm saying? And then they'll hang out there because what I've noticed about the birds is that they like to they don't like to fly in from far to grab one thing and then fly back away. They want to fly. They want to land on the peach tree. Then they want to fly 6 feet over that way and land on the star fruit, and then 5 feet over this way and land on the. That's what they like to do. Just kind of flit back and forth between things so they can get a good view of what's happening. So if you knock everything down and you flatland everything, they don't feel safe. But if you have little hiding spaces for them, they'll come and they'll get comfortable. And while they're there, they're going to eat way more bugs than you can pick off with your hands or you can shake off the tree. They'll be there all day, just hopping around eating bugs as long as they feel safe. So that's what we did. I grow Mexican sunflowers. They're like these tall stalks, and the birds kind of hide in the stalk of the sunflowers. And if you go outside and just kind of be still and watch, you just see them darting around the yard from place to place and taking care of business. It's
You
a wonderful system.
you just think you got it all figured out, don't you?
I just stay out of nature's way. I figure out what she needs me to do, and I try to help. I try to kind of ease, streamline everything because I notice, as you go through the cycles, you notice these little things. This didn't work out right this year, so let me figure that out. Maybe next year, instead of ordering this plant, I'll order that plant. And over time, man, I remember we grew mustard. It was mustard greens, and it was a few other like brassica kind of cabbage, broccoli kind of family stuff. And we grew them, instead of growing them deep into the property, I grew them right past the easement, so very close to the street. And I think it was the mustard because the mustard's like it's really tough, so it don't give a shit about the blowback or nothing like that from the cars driving by. It's a tough plant. So I grew a whole line of the mustard greens, and I come outside one day, and they're filled with ladybug larvae. I'm talking about hundreds of ladybug larvae all over these things. And I was just like, this is exactly what I needed right here. Because now that I know I have hundreds of ladybugs laying eggs here and hatching here, it's because they know there's a good food source. You know what I'm saying? They know there's mites here, there's things that they can eat, and it's just part of the environment. So you're probably always going to have something. That's part of it. Your peach tree is never going to be 100% free of mites, but if you got the right type of biodiversity, then it won't be enough mites to fuck up your crop, to fuck up your harvest. You know what I'm saying? Because everything else is kind of working in tandem with it. I love it, man. I mean, but I love it because it's easy, because it's
Well,
so simple. It's common sense almost.
there was a key thing that you said that I thought was really interesting, and I think it summed it all up. I find out what nature needs, and I just try to aid it.
Yeah.
I try to see what she's already doing
Right.
and see what I can do to kind of go with the flow and augment her natural course. Where I think that sounds way more righteous than the way we currently have the approach to things, which is, listen, I'm just going to dictate to nature what nature needs to do.
Yeah.
And if nature isn't doing it fast enough or doing it in a way that's viable for the market, I'm just going to find a way to defy nature. And I'm going to get into all sorts of weird experiments and chemicals and all kinds of unnatural things to
Right.
just make everything do what I want. And I just think finding out nature's plan already, I think would be the difference between like uh Egypt or like New York City,
Yeah.
right? Because I think when New York City falls apart, there's gonna be nothing left.
Right.
Like everything's gonna grow over it. Like it's not gonna when it finally collapses, right? It's not gonna leave behind giant stone monoliths.
No.
You
I'm
know,
gonna pull
it's
all
just
that shit
it's
right down.
right. It's just built in a way that it's not designed to be a part to work kind of into nature. Even when you see like those old, native homes that are like chiseled into the mountainside. I forget where it is, but there's like a whole city. I think there was a crazy huge one in like India or Afghanistan. I don't remember the names of all this stuff, but it's like a whole city that's just chiseled into the mountainside and it's still there to this day. And you could look at it and say, well, they don't have TVs in there. There's no electricity. It's just stupid. Yeah, it's built in a way to say, okay, what is the landscape and what is nature already doing? Well, let's just kind of go along with that. And that
Right.
seems to last much, much longer than just finding out what nature's doing. It's like chop it, cut down the hillside, blow a hole in it. Let's dig
Yeah.
up all the minerals that we can and then make a monument that's going to take so much energy for upkeep and maintenance. Like, let's do that. Yeah, that's something that's designed almost as an affront to nature,
It
almost kind of
is.
like a big middle finger to nature. Like, nah, we're gonna
It
do what
is.
we want. Yeah,
It's
it's
the
very.
difference between husbandry and dominion.
Mm,
That's the
yep.
difference. There's one is cultivation. Again, cultivation, cult to pay reverence to, protect and homage. Like there's a relationship there. What does dominion tell you? No, you
Obey.
put your foot on this bitch's neck and make her do what
Right.
she wants you to do. Right.
Right.
It's right there. It's right there. And this is the whole problem. We think we have dominion over nature and we're suffering because of it rather than trying to work together with it. It obviously has a rhythm and a functionality to it that we can't match.
But we don't want to be bound to it. We don't
Right.
want to be constrained by it.
Right. Right. It doesn't make any sense. We've worked so hard to force it to do this thing, and it just pulls us further and further away. But it also pays into the society that we have that teaches people that type of principle. You need more. That's why. That's why you're going to need more work. You're going to need bigger machines. You're going to need to dig deeper. You're going to need all this shit because you won't just pump the brakes and figure out a more functional way to engage with the landscape.
It's
If you
good
don't,
for the marketplace,
mm,
but it's bad for humanity.
definitely.
And that's where we're just not good about drawing the line to say, well, these benefits aren't worth the trade-off. I understand that this creates 5,000% more meaningless tasks and problems for people to solve and potentially make a profit from, but also it makes me remember that George Carlin quote, like, why are you worried about the planet? The planet's not going anywhere. It'll be here long after we're extinct. And it's almost like the trap is, okay, you told nature what to do to the point that you destroyed your food supply and made your environment unlivable. And when you eventually collapse, you're just going to fuel, you're going to be biodiversity for nature to recuperate. That's what we'll all end up being. So in the end, the suppression of nature, and like you said, and I vowed not to cuss, so I won't repeat it verbatim. But you have your foot on this damsel's neck, and you're imposing your will upon her. But in the end, eventually, you're gonna fail to be able to procure the nutrients and materials that you need to keep that leg strong. And when you
Right.
finally collapse, all you're gonna do is be food for nature,
Yeah,
and
she's
nature
gonna
will
be fine.
recover.
Yep, she'll
And
be fine.
yeah,
She'll be fine. It sucks that people, well, certain people at a certain level, they definitely see it. They just are completely aware and confident that they'll be able to pay their way through whatever situation arises from it. You know what I'm
oh
saying?
yeah,
They
oh
like
yeah,
you. Look, it's like if we pollute this environment to the point where nobody can survive unless you live in a 7,000 foot high rise, that's fine because I can afford to build a 7,000 foot high rise. The rest of you are fucked. And that's their mindset about this. If the only way you can survive is to pay $5,000 for a loaf of bread, guess what? I got 5 grand for a loaf of bread. I'm good. That's their
right.
attitude. That's their attitude. And a lot of people, they authority, they feel like they're correct. So a person like me who doesn't have $100 million in the bank, me saying what I'm saying is like, oh, you think you know better than the rich people? Like they obviously know better than you do. Like,
Well,
all
what's
right, well, I
all
guess we'll
about?
see.
It's all about um it's all about the field of study and why it works. So the kind of knowledge that you would have to have that sort of attitude would be one where you're making sure that mechanism that allows you to be so rich that you're detached from the problems of common people. Everything in your line of thinking is going to seek to reinforce that, right? Because it works for you. But at the end of the day, if things collapse, if Elon Musk, builds tunnels and hey, we don't just need this for travel. We're just not going to have this high speed underground tunnel. Let's bore holes into the earth because let's just create a whole nother city there because we're going to destroy everything topside. And until we get over to Mars, till we finally get it terraformed, at least we have this. We have this as an alternative. And instead of high rises, your status will be based on how deep you are underground. Like I'm 60 stories deep. I live at the very lowest point. I'm super protected. But everybody else that would be left behind, we're all the people that are kind of enabling them by continuing to participate in the system as is for them to even be in that position. Like, in order for you to get so rich that you can scoff at the problems that are going to befall just about everybody else, I'll pay $5,000 for a loaf of bread. Without everybody else being a cog in that machine to send all that wealth and all that consolidated wealth up the chain, that doesn't even exist. So it's kind of like our disinterest and complicity enables them to kind of have that attitude. When really us as common people, like you said, you don't have $100 million in the bank, who's going to listen to you? But just on, thinking rationally, it makes so much more sense that if people got on board with the program to sustain themselves and sustain each other's in a way where they can't be exploited to empower the dude that's going to have the money to pay $5,000 for a loaf of bread and doesn't care if it ever gets to that price, that just seems like a good idea. It doesn't make sense to me to continue to uphold something that does so much for so few and is clearly planning on screwing everybody else over because it's taking us to basically the brink of extinction, and there's no point where we're ever like, oh, maybe we took it too far. Maybe we've done too much. Like, no, I think we can push it further. Let it all ride. Put it on red. Put it all on red.
That's where they fucked up at. You always bet on black. No, but
I tried to fit it into the white supremacy guidelines.
Yeah.
Put it all on Edom.
Right. All of the red man. Well, the original red man anyway. Before they flipped it and rebranded it. But it's like if you tell people that everybody should be experiencing or part of their own food security in some type of way. So learning to grow something, putting something in the ground. There's no reason that people should own properties and have a bunch of fucking random ass trees that don't produce anything. Yeah, they look cool and it's big and it's not whatever. There are fruit trees that look just as cool that's going to grow for 30 years if you treat it the right way and give you crops every season. Right? There's no reason to not invest in that as a reality. And then once you get from the fruit trees, now you're talking about growing your greens or growing other little perennial food bushes that you can go outside and pick off of and make a salad. And these types of things have to become a reality, but that's also an indictment of how our lives are set up. Because immediately you're going to be thinking about, well, when I get home from 8 hours in this cubicle, I'm not going to feel like tending to my tomatoes and shit like that. It's like, well, we got to take another look at the 8 hours in the cubicle situation because obviously one of these things is going to be more beneficial to the long-term existence of humanity and the betterment of the atmosphere itself. Fuck that cubicle. That shit ain't really doing nothing for no. It may be empowering about 5 or 6 people, who are at the top of that company and the
Right.
major shareholders and shit, but it's really not benefiting anybody else. It's really just there for compliance and to force you into a place where you don't have time to realize who you really are, what you really love, what gets you excited and euphoric about life. Who has time to figure any of that shit out when the electric bill is due?
Right. And you're completely detached from nature and you're lending all of your energy to something where your labor, your time is all being siphoned up to send resources up the ladder to those 5 or 6 people that are going to be able to pay for the $5,000 loaf of bread. But they plan on leaving you holding the bag, right? So you've spent all this time basically building their escape pod.
Oh, wow. That's such a fucked up way. That
Yeah,
hurts, but that's the fact. That's a fact. You're building their escape pod, and they're gonna give you the finger As soon as they
Right.
launch, they're gonna give you the middle finger, like, thanks, asshole. Good job, jerk. That's what we're doing. That's literally
And,
what we're doing.
and if it's not transparent by now that the people in charge do not care about you, I don't care what your race or political persuasion is, there is nobody that is in charge that has the power to make the decisions that really affect our lives that care about you in the least. It's a fantasy. And it's a fantasy that you want to believe in. You don't want to believe the baby eating senators exist. You don't want to
Right,
believe it. You
right.
want to believe like, nah, there's some righteous people. They just happen to have worked their way through, hard work and study. They've worked their way up to a position of power, and now they're wielding that power with good intentions. And that they really, I think at this point, I don't know anybody that truly believes that at this point. I think I think at I think at this point you have to be willfully ignorant. I
You
think
have to be. Yeah.
you have to really be propagandizing yourself at this point because they're not even good at keeping up the appearances at this point. Like there was a time where you really believed it. The rhetoric, the behavior, they would show, hey, well, look, we did this. And now it's just like, nope, nope. We're going to get everybody into debt and send all the money overseas. We're going to leave you holding the bag. And we don't care. And there's nothing you can do about it. We don't
Right.
care. Good luck.
Yeah. And everybody's so committed to their separation, their tribalism, that instead of turning around and looking at the people that they've pledged allegiance to, they want to argue with all the people who pledge allegiance to something other than what they decided to. Like you were writing, I was looking at the document the other day, The Starving of Ego, and it was dope how you laid it out. These people over there, like we wear green makeup on our face and we chant our tribal song in D minor. Those
Right.
motherfuckers wear blue makeup and they chant their song in C sharp. We got to go kill them. We got to fuck them up. You know what I'm
We
saying?
have no choice.
We no choice. This is what the gods require of us.
You
Or
want to live in a world with blue faces and C minor anthems?
yeah,
I don't want to
it's
live in that
crazy.
world.
Instead of just looking at the thing that you pledged allegiance to and asking, is this objectively correct for the world? Is this better for everybody? And why is it so easy for us to separate ourselves from other humans just because they don't think like we think or believe like we believe? And the things that we're judging them on are usually arbitrary bullshit. What we should be asking is, hey, are you a loving husband or do you slap your wife around? I
Right.
don't give a fuck who you vote for. Because do any of us want to support abusive husbands in our quote unquote tribes? Is that what we want in our gated community? We want people who beat their wives? But
Right.
if
When
he's
really,
also a Republican, then that's not my business. As long as he votes Republican, I don't give a shit what he does.
right.
That's
And
garbage.
but really, that's what everybody's tribalism should be centered around. Because the game right now is picking out or finding those instances where you can accuse the other tribe of having some sort of wrongdoing. So, well, somebody on your team did this, this, or this. Well, somebody on your team did this, or this, and this. Well, if we were all really against this, this, and this, wouldn't we come together and agree that, yeah, regardless of what tribe we're talking about, we should purge them from amongst us? We should have a tribe of just people that find that particular behavior loathsome and don't accept it under any circumstances. Otherwise, we don't really have any principles anyway. So
Right.
if you're going to operate with that level of hypocrisy, it's a joke, and it's also under the pretense that government needs to exist, that government is here to look out for us, and what would it look like if we weren't ruled by anybody? It's like, well, if Black Lives Matter and Antifa and the Trump supporters that stormed the Capitol, if if they figured out that the people that we are empowering and the people that are using us really don't care about us and we're pitted against each other, and when it all falls apart they're not going to do anything for us, instead of fighting each other over what the political apparatus should be, right? Because all that is we're basically building the spaceship that's going to hover over us, and none of us are going to get to pilot it. But because of our consent and because of our energy, we're making sure that that exists, right? Well, maybe that's the wrong model. maybe instead of caring about holding up, this monument or this spaceship that's gonna, be above us, right? And then I win or you win because my guy is piloting the spaceship. And in
Mm.
4 years, he might have to land, and then you get to go into it, and then you get to be in the mothership and rule over everybody else. Instead of fighting about that, right? How about all of you just produce food and be independent together? And then it doesn't matter. Well, I think government should do this or I think government should do that. Yeah, but if you solve your problems amongst each other, then there's no need for government to do anything. Because if you've really been paying attention, government's not solving any problems anyway. And now it seems like the full-time game is just making us all hate each other as much as possible. Like never before. Like I remember people hated each other during the Bush era, especially after, the Iraq war. Everybody kind of liked each other after 9/11. Um, but, the way it is now, I mean, people hate each other like never before. And we're fighting over, ideas or people that none of them have really shown themselves to be even halfway decent. So I
Yeah.
don't even see the reason to fight anymore.
There is no reason other than loving to fight.
Yeah,
We
I think
just like
that's
the
what we're addicted
conflict.
to.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
just like the conflict. I remember a few years back when I saw, like, I mean, it's always kind of been happening, but it got crazy a few years ago. I remember this situation standing out to me and being like, is this really the world that we want to make excuses for? I think it was maybe a Trump rally, and one of the early Trump rallies, and some guy was wearing a shirt that was maybe pro-abortion or something. Like, it was like a random political topic,
Right.
and he was just wearing a shirt that said some stupid shit, abortion, whatever, pro-choice, and he got his ass whooped. And people were on the internet, and the way they rationalized this was he shouldn't have wore that shirt to that place. Now, he was definitely trolling. I get it. Just like when people get their ass beat and sodas thrown on them and shit for wearing "Make America Great Again" hat. So we know you're trolling. It's an ugly fucking hat, and you wore it to get a reaction out of people. I totally get it. But is that the world we want to live in? You said, well, you shouldn't have wore that. Should these people not be triggered to violence by looking at a T-shirt or an article of clothing? Like, is that a conversation we should be having? But nobody was saying that. Nobody in the whole comment section was saying, why are you beating people up over their clothing? They were
Right.
just like,
Isn't that
well,
insane?
he asked for it. How did he fucking okay, whatever. Like, I can't argue with these people. I can't do the whole like it should be common sense. What shirt could a person wear that's gonna make you punch them in the face? Or
It's
make you and
Christopher.
three of
It's
your friends?
Christopher. It's Christopher Columbus getting off the boat. How could we not rape the natives? What are you talking about?
They're here. I mean, like
And they're
what is it?
topless.
I can't even think
Right.
of a T-shirt that I could see that would make me and three of my friends chase a motherfucker down the street and beat him down. I literally can't
I
even
can't. Me
fathom
neither.
what would that be. What would be written on that shirt? That's like, fuck it, we gotta beat him.
Right.
I don't know. I don't know. It could be anything, dude. At the very least, I'm just gonna laugh at it or say this guy might be a fucking sicko, but I'm just gonna keep walking. How am I going to feel that triggered to be brought to what is, I mean, you call it what it is. It's unprovoked violence. The
The
only way you can
closest thing. The
provoke
closest
violence,
thing I could think of is a Nambla shirt with like some explicit imagery.
but that he can be arrested for that,
He
right?
could, but I could kind of understand why somebody might just be like, "Okay, you're basically asking me to beat you up."
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
because when you said try to imagine, I'm like, I imagine, okay, I got it. I got it.
A
That might be
Nambla shirt.
offensive enough that somebody, it's something even like it would be, and maybe I'm kind of messed up for being able to think of this, but it's something, obviously you couldn't have a shirt where there's something super explicit, but maybe it's just like a little kid like sucking on one of the dude's fingers. You know what I mean?
Right,
Like in
right.
a
And
suggestive
and
way.
he's at the park where you're at with
Right.
your kids and shit. Like,
Right. And that would be creepy enough to be like, why are you wearing that shirt? Or just like hanging out in front of a daycare or something. Anything where it's like you shouldn't be anywhere near children, and then having that shirt. I could see somebody like, yo, you got to go. I'm gonna smash your head in with a brick.
Yeah, I don't want to be the guy that initiates that. And also I have a, there's a history, my own personal history that I'm trying to atone for a little bit here is because I'm an anti-bully. I've been an anti-bully my whole life. I was the kid in school who was cool with people, but I kind of gathered I was magnetized towards the guys who played D&D. They was a little weird and people would pick on him and shit. I was the dude in the lunchroom who, if I saw you picking on the nerd, I'm gonna punch you in the face. That's just all. I've always been that person. I cannot stand bullies. Trigger the fuck out of me, bro. So I'm still trying to control that to this day. I'll be watching movies with my kids and see bullying in it. I'm like, I'll kick that fucking guy's teeth out, bro. Like, just getting mad and shit. But I just don't like it. So I just want to always make sure. And you know how people look at you when you're kind of a big dude and you're wide and shit. They're like, "Oh, this
Right.
fucking guy's scary." And I get that. I don't want to. I don't want to radiate that in the world. You know what I'm saying? So I also understand that what people pick up and how they process things is their business, not really my business. But I can do my best to make sure I'm not purposely radiating danger to motherfuckers. Like I
Right.
don't want to
Right.
be that guy. So if I saw a person wearing that shirt, I wouldn't want to be the person who initiated it. Like I'm going over there to fuck this dude up because I don't like his shirt. But that's just because of my own history and alignment in the world. I don't want to be a bully. I never want to cross that line. But if other people surrounded him and started threatening to fuck him up, I definitely wouldn't try to like, hey guys, let's just kind. I wouldn't try to talk
You
him
wouldn't
down at
save
all.
him.
No,
Right.
I wouldn't save him at all. You know what I'm saying? So I would let it happen. But I still, it would be hard for me to imagine something that would move me to violence just by a visual. Even if I saw a fucking skinhead Nazi with fucking swastikas all over his clothes and patches on his arm, I wouldn't approach that dude and be like, yo, what the fuck is that? I wouldn't give a shit, bro. I don't care. Now, if you start standing around me doing some of that, you know how they used to do in those old teen movies and shit, start making passive aggressive comments and stuff like
Right.
that, then I'll fold you. No problem. I'll fucking fold you in half, no problem. But if you just minding your business, walking around with Nazi regalia on, I'm not gonna bother you, bro.
Yeah. On principle alone, I wouldn't initiate it, and I I wouldn't get beat up for it, but I might even try to de-escalate. The line to me is crossed when you, because the shirt that you're wearing, like, you could really feel that way, or it could just be a troll, like it's such an inappropriate shirt. That's what makes it hilarious.
Right.
Like, I had a shirt that I bought off a t-shirt held that said "Bring Back Slavery," but
Wow.
on right.
Wow. Let's just
But
let that sizzle for a second.
hold on, hold on. But the joke is, on the back of the shirt is some big dude with an afro beating white dudes in suits, and they're like running through a cotton field. So it's like, the joke is, you see "Bring Back Slavery" and you think, oh, I already know what you mean. But then it's like, yeah, bring back slavery, but have it reversed. So
Right.
it's a funny joke.
You just gotta
But
wait for them to see the back. Like, no, look at the back, guys. Look at the
right,
back.
right, right, right. And sometimes you've already been punched and knocked out, and they only realize once you fall on your face, like,
Oh,
oh,
we get it. We get
there's a
it.
whole punchline on the other side. Oh, you should have
Yeah.
had that part on the front.
Yeah. Yes. You
Like,
should
you
have
got
led
it.
with that.
That shirt is backwards. Or maybe have it say "Bring Back Slavery" with that picture right underneath.
Right. Yeah.
But
You can't.
having
Yeah.
it on two different sides of the shirt, it's
Right.
dangerous.
That's
I
dangerous.
only right, right, right. So
So I seen once a guy in the same kind of vein. There was a guy who's an artist here, and he was obsessed with Star Wars, and his
right,
favorite character was Boba Fett. And if you know Star Wars, you probably know where this is going. So he got a vanity license plate that was named after Boba Fett's ship. Boba Fett's ship is named Slave One. So he was driving around St. Pete and Tampa in the hoods with his license plate said Slave One on it. And I remember hearing stories about how he got chased and threatened a bunch of times because people just don't know they don't know Star Wars lore that deep to be like, oh, that's
right,
Boba Fett's ship. He's like, nah, get the
right,
fuck out of here, bro. So yeah, it's dangerous shit, man. It's dangerous
right.
shit.
So and it's a mark of a civilized person that um and also a humble person that maybe I don't have the full context. Like the quicker you get to the point of okay, I just have to get to violence, like that has to come in. I don't know. It's like it's not civilized, and now that's kind of it's gone across the board to everybody, right? So
Yeah.
if you see somebody in the red hat, or you're pro-abortion, and if people aren't saying, well, you shouldn't have, you shouldn't have worn that. Like you're coming up with all this is a madman. She shouldn't have been wearing that 1950s like rape apologist. There's no difference. There's no difference. If you're not in immediate danger, if you're not in threat, and even if somebody's wearing an ambush shirt, right? The line that's crossed is like, okay, if I see you trying to walk away with somebody else's kid, right?
Oh
Then
yeah.
I might have right. That's where there's violence because somebody's in danger and you got to protect somebody,
Right.
right? That's something different than I you have an idea that so provokes me that I got to jump right to violence. And like that's a great example. I didn't know that was the name of the ship, but yeah, there's so many misunderstandings that could arise from that cuz in a different cultural context it means something immediately bad, but you don't know. If you don't know what he's referring to and you don't take the time to get to know it, you could be beating up the wrong people. So
Yeah.
I don't know. If
Yeah.
if if violence is the jump off, you should just really consider, like, especially if you think you're doing it from a just perspective. Like, I don't know, and maybe that's why some people just shouldn't. It shouldn't wield. You should never be given the reins of power, because if that's how you act on a person to person level, like I'm not even trying to understand the context or the meaning, just off with his head. Like I kind of like you would make gulags for everybody,
Yeah. Immediately. You
right?
make gulags for people who don't like the Bucks.
Right.
Because to keep it real, that's where they're going. You know what I'm saying? Because it's not a, it's a, I know this term is hated, but it's a slippery slope. Once you start trying to punish people for things that you just don't like or things that you think is offensive, how far do you think that is until you get to a place where it's just like, you know what? I don't like motherfuckers who wear red.
Right.
I mean, there's already places in this country where you can get murdered for wearing red in the wrong neighborhood, and we
Not only
accept that.
not only could you get murdered for wearing red or blue, but people are such unscrupulous opportunities that they found ways to make team hats have a red and blue version.
Right,
Oh yeah, we'll come up with a Yankees cap. We'll have the red version.
right,
You made
right,
that explicitly for Bloods in New York.
right,
Like it's nobody else you're marketing that hat to.
and we just accept it. It's just
Right.
normal. If I was to go to Cali, there's a neighborhood I could go to in Cali where I want to wear a red T-shirt today, and people are gonna be like, "Hey, man, you shouldn't wear that around here." And be like, "Are we just accepting psychopathy? Is that what it is? We
Right.
just gonna these motherfuckers are absolutely crazy and out of their minds, but you're gonna warn me about the color I'm wearing."
And doesn't that kind of tell you why there had to be secret societies of free thinkers? Like, if everybody that you live around is like, oh, well, you understand, he was wearing red, we had to kill him. He had a
Right.
pro-abortion shirt on, we had to beat him within an inch of his
Answer.
life. Don't you understand?
Yeah.
When that's the level of the consciousness of the people surrounding you, and they'll chase you down over an idea, how do you really have open ideas and have them flourish? You can't in that kind of environment.
Not at all. Not at all. Because you know where it's going. And whoever holds the most power, whoever has the biggest group of people, the biggest guns or whatever, they're going to be the ones to make the rules. And they're not going to stop at red t shirts. That's
Right.
not where this ends. You know what I'm saying? This is going to get a lot deeper and a lot stupider before it's all said and done. You be
So
playing
what
the
do you
wrong song at the red light and get shot in the face because they don't like that
right.
rapper or whatever. Oh, he snitched on somebody. So if you play his music, that means you like snitches. And my friend got snitched on, so it could have been whatever. Who knows what this psycho ass logic is? But we just accept it. We just accept it. And there's fucking rappers who are famous and rich dancing around in their videos rapping about color, t-shirt color based murders, and we're not treating them like psychos.
Right.
We're giving them awards and shit and booking
Right.
them for shows. And it doesn't make any fucking sense. It's crazy. It's crazy.
and, and you know, like there had to have been people stabbing each other to death in prison over the Nas and Jay-Z beef. Have
100%.
having never met either one of them. Like,
100%.
how dare you?
Right. You like this guy more than you like that guy? I gotta kill you.
Right? So we're not even talking about ideas that will shape the lives of our children or civilization for decades to come. These aren't even the level of ideas that we ascribe that kind of importance to, that we would be willing to kill someone else for. Like, just a matter of personal taste, a matter of um, figuring out what political philosophy may have the best skill set at the moment to solve a particular set of problems, right? What do you think about the whole parlor thing?
Did it actually get shut down?
Oh yeah, it's done. I canceled all my Amazon stuff. I canceled my Amazon card. I took myself off Prime. I wrote a big thing that I'm sure they don't care about. But I let them know, like, look, man, I spend thousands of dollars with you guys a year. I'll never do business with you again. That was a huge sucker move. It was the most unjustifiable, especially in the environment that we're in right now. Because all this started with Punch a Nazi,
Right.
right?
Yeah,
All
definitely.
this started with Punch a Nazi, and it was something that it's almost again like in the same vein of Black Lives Matter. You're making it, you're describing it as something that's so unobjectionable that it is really able to run cover for heinous acts. So you say punch a Nazi, it's like nobody has empathy for Nazis, right? And it's like, well, what kind of Nazi? Like, you raise your hand, it's like, is it somebody wearing a swastika? Is it somebody actively um, carting humans away in boxcars and taking them to ovens? Because it's a world of difference, right? So Richard Spencer is not a Nazi. He's not a part of the Nazi party, right? He actually has a lot of left wing ideas. I think he could have been trolling, but he wanted Biden over Trump in the last election, right? And he has some stick to my own. I don't want to be around anybody unless they have the same culture and ethnicity as me.
Right.
Not unlike Farrakhan. I mean, that's a mainstream, well, not a mainstream popular idea, but it's an idea that we don't feel that we have to just shut down. Like, we're not saying we got to shut down the NOI.
Right.
Uh, punch a fruit of Islam. That movement's never started, right? It's punch a Nazi, right? That's the caricature of the greatest threat and the greatest enemy. So once you cross that Rubicon, that it was acceptable just to punch anybody for any kind of belief. And the difference would be if it was somebody who was actually doing Nazi acts, right? You're actively engaged in genocide. Punching's not enough. We have to eliminate these people from the face of the earth. We
Yeah.
have to stop them. I agree with you, but you can't take such an extreme depiction and then just so casually apply it to everybody that disagrees with you. Same thing with Black Lives Matter. Look, if you tried to sell me on that with Breonna Taylor, I can't go with you. I can't go with you. If you're selling drugs and you're in a drug rate and you shoot at the cops first, they're probably going to shoot you. I don't know how we get out of that with it not being justified. Now, if you want to talk to me about Oscar Grant, right? So yeah, punching Nazis is wrong. You shouldn't do violence to somebody that just disagrees with you. But if you truly thought somebody was actively about to engage in genocide, then I'd be like, oh, yeah, I understand it. I understand it. Yeah, you got to punch somebody that's actively engaged in genocide. If you've really got racist police killing black kids with no consequence, again, violence isn't the appropriate response. But if things are going to get burned down, I wouldn't encourage it, but I kind of understand. Like, if this whole summer would have been based on Oscar Grant, I would have totally understood it. I would have totally understood it. I'd have been like, "Yep, you know, you shot someone in the back of the head and called it involuntary manslaughter. You moved the trial to Beverly Hills. You didn't have it in Oakland. You did everything you could do to protect this cop, but you shot somebody on his knees handcuffed. Like there was literally no reason to do that. None.
Right.
Like that, I understand. But if we try to shoehorn everything into that dynamic, it loses all credibility. So now the whole thing is out of control, and everybody's going to feel justified for any kind of act of violence at this point because everybody has sold themselves on the idea that they're justified. Police are killing black people. There's of course reason to get violent. There are the election is rigged. Of course we need to break into the state's capital. We're at a point where everybody feels justified for their form of vandalism or their violence based on what's going on, but only one side has actually had cover ran from it and is being allowed and promoted. And that I think is going to I think that's going to have horrible effects. I think it's going to have horrible effects because now you've got all these people who saw protests aren't supposed to be peaceful. Rioting is the language of the unheard, and all of these things where it's like, yo, people are looting and burning, and we don't condone it, but we kind of understand it. We kind of understand it because of what's going on, and there's enough evidence to justify this behavior. Okay, okay, I understand if that's your reasonable response or that's your analysis. Okay, but then you see the same thing on the other side. These are people who aren't being listened to. None of their concerns are being addressed, and they feel so ignored. They spoke the language of the unheard. They committed vandalism, a handful of them. And
Right.
it's being paraded across the news as it's insurrection. It's the storming of the Capitol. It's the siege of the Capitol. Like I'm looking at all these news articles, I'm like, wow. So it's been peaceful protesters all summer who had a justifiable reason, but these people are insurrectionists storming and sieging, laying siege to the government, domestic terrorists, because they had one day where they caused $50,000 worth of damage and they took stupid selfies like idiots.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
It's such a terrifying and beyond the pale act that not only do we have to have this super overreaction and no opinion, like people went on TV all summer and there were people that condemned the riots, right? But there was also people that excused the riots and gave apologetics for the riots, and none of those people were banned. Their Twitters weren't banned. They weren't, they were continued to be allowed to have careers on MSNBC and CNN, and they basically ran cover for violent acts all summer. And I think it's freedom of speech. You're allowed to make that argument. But now you have, I mean, the hypocrisy is so brazen, but now anybody that would try to make that same argument to justify these people feeling unheard and feeling like they have no other option but to commit a stupid, senseless, unproductive, violent act, like running in there and taking selfies and stealing laptops. But those people, like, there's no, if you even hint at they were justified in the least, again, like what's been done all summer from the other side, you're banned, you're depersoned, and they were so scared that they didn't have full control. They purged all these people from Twitter, and then when people started going over to Parler because they were being purged, they're like, we'll just find a way to completely shut down the other side. Like, you don't realize that this level of brazen hypocrisy and silencing people is what led up to this, that made people so pissed.
Right.
I feel like they're trying to engineer a conflict. Like it's totally Alex Jonesy, but I don't see how any intelligent person that wields any kind of power and understands social sciences has seen what's going on, and they've proclaimed it out of their own mouth. When you don't listen to people, when you don't let people have a seat at the table, when you don't let them have a voice, when they feel like you're making unjust decisions with no accountability, i.e., killing innocent, unarmed people and never having the court system bring them to task, you're saying out of your own mouth that you understand and acknowledge that eventually this is going to spill over into a violent uprising. And you even said that it was understandable and it was based on righteousness. And you're taking that away completely from people that disagree with you. I don't know how you don't understand that you're engineering huge conflict. And I would much rather see people figure out how to grow their own food than to continue these stupid fights. But with everything that's gone on in the last week, dude, again, I hate to be doom and gloom. This, what you're talking about now, is more important than ever.
Yeah.
Ever. I do not trust that the people in charge or that the people that make all the decisions on behalf of the country have the capability or even the consent of the people at this point to continue to do things in a way that anything that we take for granted on a daily basis is going to be readily available. It is absolutely not reliable. It is
Yeah.
absolutely not reliable. And there's no sign that anything's going to be changing anytime soon. And when I saw that, they just didn't say you can't buy the app because they did the same thing to Alex Jones. We're taking your app off the platform. They're like, yo, we're going after the companies that allow you to even exist. So it's not just you can't buy the app from the app store. Yo, you can't get onto the computers that'll allow you to have a website. We are cutting you off completely.
Yeah, well,
That's
I saw, because my homie told me it was down. When I looked at it, what they did, they just removed it from the App Store. They didn't actually have the power yet to take the website itself down. So it was removed from one of the app stores, but it looks like it's still on the Apple Store, and it's up online. Like you can get to it through your desktop. And so I'm looking at it right now, and yeah, if you can download it from Android App Store too. I just clicked it, and I'm gonna have to delete that, but but yeah. So
Amazon cut them off from their cloud service though.
okay, so
So so yeah, go
what
ahead.
is how does that affect the people who use it versus like taking it out of the cloud storage or whatever? How does
My,
that affect people?
my understanding, and it could be wrong. This is definitely not my wheelhouse. But my understanding is if you have a company like Parlor, right? You may not necessarily have the infrastructure necessary, like the server computers, the bandwidth. I'm not familiar with all of those, the science behind all of that. So I'm probably misspeaking on several points. But basically, it'd be the same thing like if you own a business, right? But they don't give you access to PayPal or Square,
Right, right,
right?
yeah, yeah,
Or so technically, yet you still have a business, but barely anybody carries cash around. So if they take away your ability to take payments from your customers, they've kind of taken away your business. Not technically, but for all intents and purposes, it's gone.
yeah.
So my understanding is they haven't outright banned them from existing, but they've taken away all the necessary business partnerships that they need in order to exist. And it was done under the justification that what happened on the 6th was so egregious and so horrific, so terrible that no one can be allowed to have a voice that might encourage it even in the least. And
Wow.
this is all while you have people on Twitter calling for people to be fired for supporting Trump. Everybody that enabled him needs to be cataloged and put on a list and needs to be ostracized professionally because I don't know how much you chose to poison your mind over the last couple months, but his whole legal team was threatened and a lot of them had to quit because people were basically like, yo, you're not going to be able to work for our law firm. If you take up this case, you will not have a job here. So everybody was basically intimidated from making him an untouchable. When really it's like, but it's a free country. Even Alan Dershowitz was the lawyer for Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, Donald Trump is worse than Jeffrey Epstein, a case about being an international uh, child trafficker is a less heinous crime or a less heinous situation to have a lawyer than I don't believe the election was legit and I want to challenge it on a constitutional legal basis. So Alan Dershowitz still has a job and he's still allowed in the public square. He's still, allowed in polite society. But any attorney that took up the lawsuits to have a constitutional challenge of the election, those people all have to be depersoned. Yo, that's
Yeah,
that's Chinese authoritarianism, man. That's
absolutely,
it's here.
100%. It doesn't make any fucking sense to be honest. How the difference in what people are doing. I'm seeing the same people who would fucking try to set Twitter on fire for banning somebody before and grilling them for it because of censorship. Now they're saying, well, their terms of service says that if you blah blah blah, it's like, oh, now we're about terms of service. I'm seeing the turnabout, but I'm seeing it on both sides, which makes it even more hilarious to me because it feels like a script that a simulation would write. A few months ago, there was never a reason for violence. There was never a reason to destroy property. There was never a reason to disrespect the cops. Just follow their orders and everything will be fine. But now, because you're under the impression of whether how true it is or not is up for debate, but you're under the impression that the election was stolen and that there was massive voter fraud and all this shit. So now that's a God-given constitutional right to overthrow the government if they become tyrannical. Now it's a reason to disobey police commands. Now it's a reason to commit violence. And I'm just like, so what's different? Do you not understand how other people could feel disenfranchised? They could feel like it's a whole bunch of shit going on, but exactly what people on the right were saying a few months ago, people on the left are saying now, and vice versa. They've all kind of adopted the other side's arguments about what's going on right now. And it's amazing to me. It's absolutely amazing because it's clearly orchestrated. What are the odds that something like that just develops organically out of its own chaos? This shit is orchestrated. This is exactly what they want you to do. And there's a lot of people still holding on to this idea that, it's the final hour and now Q is about to reveal how all the celebrities and politicians are baby eating pedophile murderers. And we got the evidence and I'm like, so if you got all this evidence, what the fuck are you holding it for? Why haven't you released this shit already? Because they have to wait till the last moment. No, they don't. If you got evidence that politicians and actors and Hollywood elites and shit are murdering children and doing all of this crazy, evil, psychotic shit, if you hold it for an opportune time, you are also a scumbag. Just to be clear, you're not at the same level of scumbaggery, but you're a douche lord too, bro. Why didn't you could have put this shit out at any time? So what is it that you're waiting for? What is the opportune time for you to show us that the world is run by freaking cannibal pedophiles? What's the right moment to reveal that? And why won't you just take some military people and commandeer a news station and just play that shit? Just show it. We've seen it a million times in movies and shit. Once it hits the internet, it's a wrap. You can't stop it. If you upload it somewhere, 30,000 people are going to record it and upload it somewhere else in a matter of seconds.
Right.
So what are we waiting for? When does Hunter Biden's laptop full of, kid murder, when do those pics come out? And not with blurred faces and redacted names. When does that shit come out for real? I just don't understand why, if anybody had that type of information, they would wait. Because we don't. What else do we have right now? That's the only thing that's going to change most people's minds, because the average person has no concept of who's voting for who and how many numbers. All they know is this guy's evil and he's a dick, and I don't want him to be the president. That's all they know. And the other people, they say, I like that he's a jerk and a misogynist,
Right.
but I want him to be. But like, so they love it. So many people are aligned with him. It bugs me out because they claim they just want the truth. They just want the absolute truth to come out. But they also say, if Trump started a third party, I'd support him. So
Well,
what is it about this guy that makes you align with him as a person? I understand what he may represent as an alternative to the system. I get that. But what makes you think he's the guy to be the head of this new thing that you want to be a part of? That's the part I don't get. I don't understand that at all. I mean, he's clearly a jerk. And being a jerk is not the same as being a baby eating psychopath. Don't get me wrong. It's not the same. If he's a jerk, that's fine. We can deal with that. We can shun him later when we're done publicly executing the pedophiles.
well, if you're super cynical, and it's one thing to know too, like he's the savior to one side and he's the antichrist to another side.
Right.
Like I mean, I remember under Obama it was very polarizing, but I can't think of a time where people were this divided about how they feel about another human being as their boss, not as their friend, right? Because if Donald Trump was your friend and y'all were cool and he was kind of a jerk, some people might look at you in a weird way, like, yo, man, he's kind of a jerk. Like, you really cool with him? Like, because your own personal friendship dynamic with that person may be so drastically different, it would be hard for you to come, it would be hard for you to figure out how could you carry on a relationship with a person that's like that, right? But if it's your boss and it's like, look, I got a good job, I got good benefits, he takes care of me as a boss and he makes sure the company's always growing and that the company's always profiting. So attaching myself to this person as a boss is different than attaching myself to this person as a friend, right? Or as a
Right.
as a moral or spiritual leader. And I think the the polarization around just this one person has gotten to such a crazy degree. Like, there's people I can't even talk to anymore because I don't hate Trump. Like, it's not just enough, like, oh, you love Trump. I don't love Trump. I don't love Trump. I just don't hate him. Like, that's unacceptable. It's like the same thing. Like, how do you not hate the devil? How could you not hate the devil? Right? You're just okay with the devil. Like, I kind of think that he did some good things. If he created spaceships, I mean, don't you like NASA? I mean, if it's the bearer of light knowledge, like, we got a lot of technology and modern day conveniences that came out of the devil, right? Of having knowledge. So I'm not saying I'm pro devil, right? I don't agree with the baby eating, right? But I like having a toaster. And if we were just in the garden and we had no knowledge and we never figured out how things worked and we never built a toaster, I'm not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I mean,
Right.
I wouldn't go hang out with at his house. I wouldn't get a tattoo with him, you know. But if he made a toaster, I'm not going to stop eating toast because he's responsible for the toaster. And
Right.
that's the thing. It's like, okay, well, Trump, uh, Trump. This is the reason why people loved him and why he enjoys all this support. The right has hated their own party for the longest. They've absolutely hated the Republicans. The Republicans don't do anything. Um, they they don't do anything unless they have a common interest with the Democrats, which is for two things: keeping the rich rich, and one of the ways they keep the rich rich is for making sure we're at war. So as long as we're about getting into wars and as long as we're about making the rich rich, then the Republicans and Democrats are going to find common ground. And that's why Ron Paul was cast out as such a weirdo, because he was like, nah, I don't think we need to be invading any other countries. Like, all right, well, you have no home here, sir.
Right.
Like, we can't accept you. Like,
You
you're
all
a
the way
kook.
off script right now. What the fuck are you even talking about?
Right. You're
No,
you're
no
you're
invading countries. What else do we even do?
right. You're not a mainstream politician at this point. He was marginalized the entire time. That's why he was only like a congressman. He was never even a senator. Um, but the right never liked the Republicans or hasn't liked the Republicans for a very long time. And so Donald Trump was the only president to get into office to prioritize the things that everybody who's been paying attention knows that we need, like, for the longest. So both parties have been working together to make sure more jobs go overseas, more illegal immigrants come in and lower the wages of everybody else, So all of the things that are good for interest, good for the interest of super wealthy people. I'm not talking about somebody that owns a corner store, right, or owns a dog grooming business, or owns a pizzeria. I'm talking about people who are dealing with billions and billions of dollars. Yeah, it makes sense. I want to pay people less. China will hold a gun to their head. I want to put my factory there. Yeah, it's gonna disappoint a lot of Americans. A lot of families are gonna break apart. A lot of people are gonna turn to alcohol and opioids because they don't have a way to feed their family anymore. A lot of people are gonna turn to drug dealing and criminality because I'm taking the opportunities away. The only thing I can say is sucks to be them. I'm gonna buy this labor off of China, and I'm gonna depress wages and keep them even lower because I'm gonna flood the country with people who will work for next to nothing. So I don't have to give them benefits. I don't even have to acknowledge that they're alive or that they exist. I can exploit people here, right? Because they're here illegally. And I can exploit people abroad because China is going to completely oppress their people in ways that you couldn't get away with legally anywhere else in the world. So that's the agenda. Both parties have been getting money off of it for the longest time. Donald Trump was the only person to say, now we're gonna take on China. No, we're gonna start putting tariffs on. You're not gonna flood our country with cheap goods. We're gonna start trying to manufacture here. Now the cynical thing is, did he do all that stuff about immigration and manufacturing? And these are both issues that both parties couldn't be more interested in. They're the number one issues that affect whether you, as an American citizen, can get a decent job and feed your family and have an opportunity to make your way as a regular dude in America. Those are the two biggest issues. So if the government was serious about solving problems that would improve the condition of your life, to improve the ability for you to get wealth, those are the two main issues that they would address:
Right.
illegal immigration and taking on China. Donald Trump was the only person that did that. So it's not even about his character. Nobody cares about his character. They overlook his character. They follow him because he has enough money and enough of a voice to be able to make a dent in what's needed. Because everybody on the right that they've handed the baton to has absolutely let them down, right? So they got George Bush in office. Let's invade Iraq, even though they had nothing to do with it. All right. Let's have Medicare Part D. We can't afford it, but yeah, let's just do it. Let's just give everybody drugs. Well, that's good. So now the government is paying your tax money directly to the pharmaceutical industry, and guess what? All the doctors are going to find reasons to give
Oh
your
yeah.
senior citizens drugs.
Yep.
So it works great to extract a whole bunch of money to get us a whole bunch further in debt and to hand all that money over to either a defense contractor, to a drug company. So that's the game. All of these big industries have just been sucking wealth away from people. And when we get into debt, it makes us less viable as a country. But where did all that money go? It went into the hands of a small number of people in these industries that all of the political establishment is in bed with and supporting and profiting off of, and nobody's taking that on. And on the left, we loved Obama because George Bush got us in a stupid war. All right, well, Obama's going to be a lot better, right? Nope, we're going to sign Patriot Act 2.0. We're going to make the Patriot Act even more invasive. We're going to spy on you even more. All right, well, I guess if it keeps us safe, I mean, we haven't had another 9/11, so I guess that's cool. But at least he's not going to get us into war. No, no, no. We're gonna drone weddings. We're gonna drone American citizens. We're gonna drone everybody. Your tax dollars are going to go towards raining fiery, destructive misery all over the world in places you've never seen, people you never met, but your labor and energy is making sure that we have the capabilities to go over there and make those people's lives absolutely miserable. Absolutely miserable. I'm not sure I want to do that. Well, I don't think you've been paying attention. We are going
Mhm.
to always be at war, always be extracting money from the taxpayer, giving it over to giant industries. We're going to enforce the law against you, and we're going to break the law for their benefit nonstop.
It's ridiculous. Like, just to be fair, also let me also to completely illustrate the character of Donald Trump. He went on TV and said, "We got to stop China because China's killing us. They're tearing us apart." And everybody cheered. And then the host of the show asked him where his ties were made.
Oh yeah.
Anybody want to take a guess where his ties were made? So this is the guy that we're talking about fundamentally. So I understand that he says the right shit and he has the right ideas, but he's taking advantage of the same slave labor cut cost prices so he can turn around and mark it up and sell it to Americans for exorbitant amounts and make
For
even more
sure.
money. So
And
what's the difference?
if he really cared, he would charge $300 a tie, and he would make it in. I mean, this is all that it takes. Make it in America, and your margins are smaller. Maybe you're
Right.
only going to be a millionaire instead of a billionaire. But if your margins were so small, right, or so much smaller, that here's what you got out of it. It was produced without any extraction of wealth by creating massive human misery. And instead of being worth $2 billion, you only ended up being worth $6 million. But
Right.
all the people that made your product had a livable wage, could take care of their wife and their kids, could support themselves, and they didn't have to do it at gunpoint, and they didn't have to do it in such miserable conditions that they were trying to kill themselves. Could you make your margins smaller? Would that be
Right.
worth it to you? Like, you won't be worth $2 billion. I'm sorry, you're gonna die and you're never gonna be a billionaire. But you get to leave your kids $400 million. 400 million's not enough. 400 million, and that's the problem. Everybody that's in that position, it's never enough.
Right.
There's no moral hurdle that's too big for them to scale over, and that's where the real debate comes in. Is Donald Trump really a grifter? Did he get into power just because Barack Obama cracked that joke at the correspondence dinner, and he was so appalled that he's like, you know what, I will. And he so wanted to get into power, he hooked up with people like Steve Bannon, who had their hand on the pulse of populism and what people wanted and what the real issues were that people were ignoring. And it's not like he believes any of this stuff, so of course he gets his ties made in China because he's part of the problem. But he knows enough of what the actual issues are, what none of the politicians are actually touching, because for them in their careers and their fundraising, those are all third rail issues. They're not going to
Right.
touch them.
Right.
But is he just coming along and saying, I know all the right things to say because I know what the people want to hear, but he truly
Exactly.
has no desire to make any of it happen?
Because if
It's
you look at his
possible.
moves, yeah, you look at his moves. Just look at what he's doing, and he's showing you that he's basically operating the same or very similar to the people that he's condemning. So what
I
does
mean, he
that
did
tell
get
us?
peace deals. He did get historic peace deals, and he did chill with the droning. He did ease up on the bombing. He had one event where he bombed people in Syria, right? But aside from that, it's he didn't invade no new countries.
That's
He
a good
didn't
thing.
he didn't let us get in, provoked into a war with Iran, which they were really, really pushing for. So I mean, in that regard, I can't front on him.
Right.
He he
Yeah.
he he was more of he was the most positive force in my lifetime for minimizing the amount of young kids we're sending off to go kill young kids in another part of the world for no real reason.
Right.
And I'll give him credit for that. The dealing with illegal immigration, you really didn't do anything. I mean, manufacturing, you really didn't do anything. I mean, but at the same time too, you really don't have that much power as president to enact policy. That's got to be done by Congress and the Senate, and the Congress and the Senate is filled with people who could care less.
Right.
And maybe he
It's
lost. Maybe he lost. I'm totally open to the fact that he lost, but the difference is when it comes to one side of justifying the violence, right? Every day we get bombarded with news stories about how black people are oppressed and hunted down in the country. And in some instances, I think it's warranted, right? I think in some instances the behavior is so egregious and so beyond rational explanation that the public has a right to demand further investigation. Like, why did you really shoot them? Like, what was really going on? You know? And I always bring up the Oscar Grant case because I think in our lifetime, that's to me, the most open and cut case. And I don't even know if it was necessarily about race, but it was definitely about an abuse of power.
There we
Daniel
go.
Sha- Daniel
That's it.
Shavers is another one. Yeah,
Exactly. See, it keeps going. See, that's what I was about to say is that I think we know enough as a society to not parse this out by race. Cops are out of fucking control.
for
Period.
sure.
Period. They're having fun killing people. They're having people go around the country and teach them about how they're predators and they're murderers and they're carving you're fucked on the side of their
Right,
firearms. And they're
right,
driving
crazy.
tanks and they're dressing like the fucking Punisher.
Right,
We should be able to agree as a complete society that this shit needs some attention. But we're so divided, we got to parse it out. There are people in this world who, if you see a black person dead on the ground, you assume that they did something wrong.
right.
If you show a white woman dead on the ground, you're outraged and your heart hurts. That's a fucking problem. Before we get any information, you look at the racial demographic of these victims, and your feelings are sent a different way through your body just because of the race of the people. To me, that doesn't make any sense. I don't understand that at all. But I mean, not saying I don't understand it because we know what the root of that is. These people they've been brainwashed, they've been programmed to feel a certain way, to think a certain way. I was this when I was young, and I'd be sitting, we were just talking about this in the text the other day. When I would hear some shit on the news about, oh, somebody shot up a fucking bank and murdered 3 people, I'd be like, oh God, please don't be black. Because I felt like I would have to explain it somehow, that I would be held accountable for other black people's actions. But then when you hear, oh, somebody broke into somebody's house in the middle of the night and killed the whole family and ate them, you're like, oh, that ain't us. That ain't my
Right.
problem. Right. So this is not a problem to society. It's not a problem for humanity. This is something that you can just write off because it doesn't matter because it's white people's issue. It's a fucked up frame of mind to be in. But this is what our relationship with each other in this country has done to us. You know,
But
it
it
took
all,
a
but
long
it,
time to
yeah,
shake that shit off.
but it also assumes that all black people are struggling with the compulsion to murder people, and that all white people are struggling to suppress the compulsion to eat other people.
That's
Like
true though. That part's
it,
true.
and
All white people are latent cannibals. That's just the truth. I mean, let's
just,
just
but the reality is, it's like none of us should be wearing that 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 target, or enduring that burden of responsibility because somebody looks a little bit like us. Like, it should be like, I didn't do it, so I have nothing to do with it. It's horrible the what's happened, right? But the way that we're pitted against each other is we've been engineered to have selective outrage based on who the victim is and who the perpetrator is. But there is just no baseline level of morality that's universally applied. And you broke it down um beautifully in saying like everybody has completely switched sides of their philosophy almost overnight. You know, yeah, writing is the voice of the unheard. Nope, there's never a reason to not follow an order or to be violent towards the police. And one event made everybody switch sides. These people need to be punished to the fullest extent of the law. You can't allow this kind of chaos.
right.
Sometimes you got to bum rush a cop. Wait a minute, are you guys the same guys?
Yeah.
And it's just the convenience of being able. But the difference is, right, is the tribalism is so heated and so intense that you're not allowed to think critically and parse out facts without offending one side or the other. So I've gotten very comfortable with having no racial, no political, no cultural home. I don't have one because I'm going to have to make concessions and acknowledge things that I know are not true. And The idea that nobody in the news was concerned with or speaking about black victims is nonsense. It's all we've heard. And not only is it all that we've heard, we've gone out of our way to represent the facts in such a way to maximize rage.
Yeah.
Because the Ahmaud Arbery thing, you could be upset about it. Like, yeah, why were those two dudes? And maybe they did it with the racial animus. Like,
Right.
but
Right.
why are you being vigilantes and tracking this dude down? Like, maybe he was stealing something, right? Maybe he was casing houses or newly constructed houses. I don't think he was really, I mean, he could have been like, I'm thinking about being an architect. It's really interesting to me how they're making these new houses. It's
Right.
plausible. I know he wasn't going out for a jog in Timberlands, right? But whatever the case may be, um, did you really have to follow him and hunt him down like that, right?
Right.
To
Right.
talk to him. But at the same time, is once you run across the street, because you're on the opposite side of the street, once you run at him, grab his gun, and punch him, I don't know what else he's supposed to do at that point. Because at
Right.
any moment you can snatch that gun from him, and now he's dead. So you put him in a position where it's either him or me, right? So there's a lot of nuance to that case. But when you make the story, a black man was running for a jog, just jogging, and these two devils ran up on him and murdered him in cold blood. When that's the story that you put out, you are maximizing rage. When you tell the Breonna Taylor story and you don't say, well, she was a part of a fentanyl syndicate, she was helping them hold the money,
No,
like
she was sleeping in her bed and they killed her because she was black.
they were like, you know what? Hey guys, how many black people have we killed this year? 7? Oh man,
It's not enough.
we are really not putting up the numbers this year. Why don't we do this? Why don't we say it's a drug raid? We'll break into a random house. Let's just start shooting black people. Let's get it on. So
Right.
when you present it out to the public as they raided the wrong house, they shot innocent people in their sleep, of course, I heard that and I'm like, yo, this is disgusting. Of course I was outraged. But I've learned at this point, the moment I hear a story that's designed to make me outraged, now I just know, let me actually look what happened. Like I've been able to 100% predict at this point now. When I hear a story like that, I know the information's being left out. So sure enough, I start looking into that story. It's like, oh, so one of the cops got shot first. Okay. Oh, it wasn't the wrong house. This was actually a fentanyl syndicate that was being monitored for years
Right.
before this drug raid happened. So now it's a different story. It's not an innocent EMT being gunned down in her sleep. Her sleep. It was an instance where police conducted a drug raid, and we can argue about whether the drug raid could have been conducted better or not. But the story isn't racist police are hunting down black people. So why are you presenting the story in that way? But the fact of the matter is if you feel like that, if you feel that police are targeting black people, you have an advocate in the news media saying your side of the story, sometimes to the extent that they're willing to falsify and misrepresent the story just to gain you a tougher leg to stand on to make your argument, right? So you have an advocate in the public. Okay. And that justified violence. Where is the advocacy for people who feel like the election was stolen? Because that's what we're really talking about. When we talked about the riots all summer, we're talking about people who are under the perception that it is what it is. People are under attack. The police are out of control, and there may absolutely be some merit to that. But the difference is there was a news media explaining here's why they're angry. Here's the stories of what's going on. Even if we're misrepresenting the facts, we think, yes, the violence is deplorable, but isn't it understandable? Versus people that you've accused of being violent the entire time, who for the most part haven't been going out and getting crazy, right? But you've literally given them zero representation in the news media. You wouldn't look at any of the evidence or tell their story, or you weren't concerned at all. So these are people who have no advocate in the public square. And not only do they not have an advocate, when they try to get their own voice, you ban them off of Twitter. When they try to get their own Twitter, you take that off of the internet.
Yeah.
So these are people, it's the same thing. They feel like, and maybe their feelings are wrong. Maybe Joe Biden really did get 80 million votes and really did win the electoral college. And maybe there wasn't enough fraud to change the outcome, right? Maybe that is the objective reality. But the point is you never gave them an opportunity to look into it. Not one time did you acknowledge the fact that these were people who had a perception. They were operating off of their perception. And if their perception was true, you would understand why they were doing that. Because if you thought that, it's a communist takeover, this is the end of America, socialism is coming, they were so willing to make this happen that they would just cheat, and all the judges are in on it, and all the news media outlets are having a blackout. You've kind of painted a reality for them that makes sense. In the same way that by putting stories out constantly and misrepresenting the facts to maximize outrage, if black people objectively didn't have a reason to be explicitly upset with the police and with the country's history, if there wasn't an objective reality, you've at least given them that ammunition via your perception. So one side, you're trying to rile up, and when something's not really there, you're like, nah, it's there. You're just killing black people in their sleep. It's there. And the other side is like, yo, we found, 44,000 people that voted more than once. Doesn't exist. Doesn't
Right.
exist.
Right.
Okay. Well, you won't talk about it, so we'll just get together and talk about it on Twitter. No, you won't, because you're banned. All right. Well, we'll just go on over to Parlor. No, you won't, because Parlor's coming off the internet.
Yeah. I
You
have to
won't.
say too, I think it's very bothersome when you tell somebody that the guy admitted in a hearing under oath that 44,000 people voted more than once, and your next question is that enough to overturn the election? I feel like you're a little slimy if that's your next question. Because I've had that several times happen to me. I'm like, I saw it with my own eyes. They're like, yeah, but is that enough though? What the fuck you mean? Is that enough? They
It is
just
in
admitted to
Nevada.
some
Yeah.
garbage. Like, is this something that we just accept? What if they would have told? What if it would have been the opposite, and Biden was saying he lost? And I'm sure if they found 44,000 people voted twice
Right.
for Trump, they would have been like, oh, there it is. That's a fraud right there. It's like it's horrible that you can just accept that because it helps your side.
Right.
It just looks
Nobody's moral.
disgusting. It looks
Tribalism
disgusting.
destroys morality.
100%. 100%. Because how it starts is these are our tribe, so no matter what they've done, we'll deal with them. You can't deal with our tribe, you know what I'm saying? And then after that, you end up not even dealing with them. You just say, fine, I don't give a shit. If they stole, so what? They stole from you. They didn't steal from us. And then
Right.
eventually, housing all these scumbags and criminals, guess what happens then? Then the shit starts to spread, the sickness and the garbage starts to spread internally, and then they're all fucking each other over, which is why it's so hilarious to me that people are outraged. They're like, oh, the CIA spied on a sitting president. Okay. But you can't do that in America. Wait, so we created the CIA to spy on other motherfuckers and destabilize their governments, and that's okay. But if they do it to
Right.
now, it's a
Right.
problem. That's amoral behavior. I'm sorry, I can't. I get it. You got to have your guard dogs. You got to have your soldiers, but they're supposed to go out in the world with like rules of engagement and shit, right? So maybe you need spies. Maybe you need to have spies. But this is the reason that Egypt didn't have a standing army, right? You have to know that these tactics and shit that you're teaching these people, he's not just going to use that on Russians.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? He's going to take all of this shit that you taught him of how to steal information and espionage and blackmail motherfuckers for money, and they're only going to do it to foreign governments and foreign people. You're
Right.
out of your
And
fucking
and you
mind.
and you get addicted to the power, and in so many ways it is a lot of stuff catching up with us.
Right.
It is kind of like, okay, well, you were cool with COINTELPRO, so when J. Edgar Hoover was just targeting, Bob Marley and Peter Tosh and Malcolm X and Martin Luther King and the Panthers, then
Right.
it was like, yeah, that's what they're supposed to do.
That
But
was
when
fine.
they're like, yo, we can get dirt on everybody. Now we got a surveillance apparatus, basically a spy state. So I mean, with with the way technology is evolved, you know, if you have someone like J. Edgar Hoover that has a propensity to go after a particular group, right? But now you have it to where he knows every conversation, every website visited, every phone call. I mean, he's got everything. Who do you think's in power now, and what are they going to do with that information if they really have made their careers off blackmailing and spying? And yeah, you've given that toolkit to people who they got to find somebody to do it on. And so yeah, that level of power goes to their head. I'm sure they have a lot more sway over what political decisions get made than the politicians do, you
Yeah.
know. And even Chuck Schumer said it on, I forget on what interview, but he was like, "Listen, he's going against the intelligence agencies. They have 7 ways from Sunday to get back at you." Like this is a senator, and I think he's the head. He's the leader of the Republicans in the Senate. He's getting on TV basically saying, "Yo, Donald Trump, the CIA and FBI got something for you." Like you just made an open threat against the president coming from the FBI and the CIA. So, dude, it's that part of it is really terrifying and it's evil. But also, if you think about if you think about the hypocrisy involved in hating the fact that when it's used against you, it's a problem. Um, it kind of just makes it to where it's hopeless because really all people should be united in the fact that maybe we shouldn't be toppling other people's governments. Like maybe we shouldn't be using blackmail and being subversive to all these other countries and destroy. Like why do we want to do that?
Right.
I mean, what business of it is, especially if we're going into debt to pay for it and we're not solving the problems here. It's hard for me to really care. It's hard for me to care if you've got the financing necessary to go and blackmail and subvert a country that I'll never go to ever in my
Right.
life. I
So
just don't
we're
care enough.
yeah, the people the people here are going into generational debt to pay for destabilizing these governments, but the people who make the call to destabilize them are getting generationally rich from it.
Well, yeah,
You know what I'm
and
saying?
they can
This is a
fly away
broken
whenever they
system.
feel like it, for
It's not
sure.
this is this fucked up terrible operating system. It doesn't make any sense that we deal with this and that we accept it, but it's the classic hooray for you, hooray for me, screw you energy. You know what I'm saying? If you trip and fall, I'm gonna fucking laugh and point. But if I trip and fall and you laugh, I'm gonna come punch you in the nose because you can't laugh at me. It's like what are we doing with our lives? This is what's happening, and that's why I stay out of it. I completely withdraw from it, bro, until I'm not getting involved with it because I feel like every aspect of this shit has been scoured with a fine-tooth comb, and the solution does not exist within the game. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't exist
No,
inside that game. You have to think above the operating system. You got to learn to be the programmer because everything that goes on within the confines of that simulation, it's all made to operate the way it operates. There's no hack from the inside. I mean, maybe the stock market. You can play the stock market and get enough money to pay your way out of the system and buy a compound big enough to where you don't have to worry about this shit. So you can play the game that way. But as far as solving it and changing the overall balance of how things are, that can't be done from within inside the system. You got to
you,
create something else.
you know what it is? It's going to one of those carnival games. You
Mm,
got to knock the
yeah.
jugs
Yep.
over. You got to
Yep.
get it, and it's like you think the game is being able to win. No, no, no. That game's rigged. The
Yeah.
real game is leaving the carnival and then buying it. Like
Right.
that's winning the game is when but in that context, you're in that little booth throwing the ball or whatever,
There's
and you
no
think
wins for you,
that's the
bro.
game, right?
There's no
There's
wins for you. You standing in the wrong position. The carnies laughing at you. Like it doesn't make any sense. This whole shit that's happening right now is chickens coming home to roost, and everybody's outraged. I just don't understand why you would think that these tactics that we've been deploying on other people are completely acceptable, but it's horrible to think that people would do it to us, or that even worse, we would do it to ourselves internally. You know what I'm saying? It would break down and people, everything is splintered. I don't understand how you hold those thoughts in your head. It's okay for us to do it to them, but it's not okay for that to be done to us. And especially because what war in the last 50 years, what conflict that we've been involved in has made our lives and our world objectively better, other than low gas prices?
Or made the lives of the people there better.
Oh, that's out of the question. That's why I didn't even say that. That's out of the question. I don't think anybody
But
in
you could sell
America,
me on that.
I don't think
You
anyone in America cares. I don't think anybody, if they say, yo, we went to fucking Zimbabwe and we got made sure that some guy got murdered, we dropped off a shipping container full of weapons to make sure this guy got murdered. We put this other guy in power and now he's going to do whatever he's going to do. Where did everybody's thinking about where that trickles down to Americans, making a come up some kind of way. Nobody cares about the guy who got murdered. Nobody cares about Patrice Lumumba.
right.
They don't give a fuck. Oh, what happened to him? They chopped him up and put him in a barrel. Oh, well, who cares? I mean, whatever. They don't give two shits. But if you take, an American white woman goes to another country and somebody trips her and she falls, that's reason to drop a fucking nuke. It doesn't
I mean,
make
it's
any
not.
sense. Yeah, this white lady tripped and fell. She skinned her knee. We got to kill them all.
All right, buy shares of Lockheed Martin. It's going down.
Right. We can't, because if we let them trip one of us, next thing you know, they'll
Right.
be over here trying to take our resources. You mean like
Nah,
we're
they'll
over there
be
taking their resources? You mean like
nah,
that?
they'll be
Oh,
over
that's
here.
different.
People will be falling in the streets. They'll infiltrate, they'll trip us all over here. No one will be able to walk anywhere. It's coming. It's
Yeah.
coming. They will retaliate.
Yeah,
But the
it doesn't make
tribalism too
sense.
is silly because um the same people now that are okay with the CIA abuses, I know these people. I know they specifically railed against COINTELPRO for years. Years after the fact. You see our government's evil, our CIA is evil, Iran Contra, you know what I'm saying? They just money toppling governments, they're selling drugs, they'll even let people in their own country sell drugs if it help fund their interests somewhere else. Like, isn't that evil? Yeah, it's evil. And I feel like they force you for the sake of tribalism that you can't be consistent. Like, yeah, I think the CIA was evil when they were systematically destroying um, black people's organization, right? Because it wasn't. I think Marcus Garvey was. I mean,
Yeah.
he was
Yeah.
targeted too. So I mean,
Absolutely.
there's nobody that you can find in history where these agencies weren't making their lives hell, right? So all of it, but as soon as that hell is shined upon somebody that you don't like because the news told you not to like, right? And this personality is much that it's hard to like certain things about him for sure. But then you're like, yeah, the CIA is good. The CIA is good. No, no, and and so because of tribalism, like I have to hate Donald Trump. I have to now think that the CIA is good, right? I have to think that it doesn't matter if the election was stolen. And I have to think that there's no nuance to be examined in any police shooting. So I have to disarm all of my critical thinking in order to be able to peacefully coexist with one group or the other. I can't do that. I'll be a loner. I'll be an oddball. I'll make
Yeah.
my own cult. I don't care. Like I can't go with either one of you guys down these paths where for the sake of gaining power that's part of the problem are going to completely abandon your critical thinking and your moral compass if it gets you to where you want to go. And one thing I'll say that it might be the best thing to come out of this and something to consider, maybe our elections have been rigged the entire time.
Right.
Maybe this has been going on the
Right.
entire time. And because this dude was an outsider, he's the only one to make a stink about it. And if any of the other ones would have really made us think about it in the past, I mean, Gore kicked up a little dust, but at the end of the day, he was like, "Nah, I don't even bother with the recount. I'm good. We already had one. I'm not gonna keep fighting this out. Whatever, whatever, whatever." And we seem to have Republican, Democrat, Republican, Democrat. So each party gets their turn, at raiding the coffers and feeding their friends at the trough, and
Yep.
they each take turns, but they're basically running a train on America, and they give each other a high five on the way in. Like that's why there's always a peaceful transition, because they're all on the same thing. So, if we've done things in other countries and we've made it look a little subtle, because there was somebody, I forget what they call it, but it's like a statistical term, and there's certain things that I forget what the governing or officiating body is, but they examine elections throughout the world to question whether it's legit or not. So Vladimir Putin has an election, Chavez has an election, right? And they report like this is bogus. Like we looked at the data. Was clearly a rigged election. And I heard that if you apply those same international principles that we use to evaluate whether an election was rigged or not, if you apply them to us, you say see the same thing. And the
Of
reason
course.
why none of the courts were going to take a look at it, none of the news was going to be honest about it, because they all kind of know that, yeah, this is just how it is. But we never had anybody just force us to take a look at it. So it's never getting to the Senate, it's never getting to the court. And one other thing I'll put a tinfoil hat on about, um, they were going to object to this vote. So the analogy I got in my head was like, okay, I'm a white dude and I go to Rosewood and I just start raping women. And the people in the community are so outraged. They're like, yo, this dude is just straight raping our women. Like, we're going to get him. So I go to jail and a mob from Rosewood breaks me out of jail. And they're like, yo, we're going to lynch this dude because you just come in here into Rosewood and you're raping all the women. Like, devil, we have to hang you and kill you. I'm like, okay. And the police get me back. And the police are like, no, 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 no. We have the rule of law. We're not just going to let you hang this clearly what is a rapist. You
Right.
can't just lynch a rapist. That's the purview of the law. And you know what else? Because you broke in here to try to lynch him, we're not going to charge him at all. Wait a minute. He's still a
He's
rapist.
still a rapist. What the
He's
fuck are
still
we
a
talking?
rapist, yeah. But
Yeah,
you
but you
broke the
messed up.
rules and you tried to lynch him. Wait a minute. You guys have been coming in and accusing us of rape and lynching us for years. Yeah, that was then. This is now. And you tried to subvert the law, break in, and deliver justice yourself. So because you did that, we're not going to charge him. So wait a minute. All of these people were going to object and bring up all these issues. 44,000 people voting more than once, thousands of people that had moved out of state. I mean, we're talking about hundreds and thousands of votes. And many of them, it's not even an argument whether it was unconstitutional. In the Constitution, only the state legislatures can make those changes. Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, there was places where determinations made by judges, made by governors. There was illegal ballot harvesting. You can't just create a new location to harvest ballots. They did that in Wisconsin. All of this information was reviewed, not covered by the news, but people who were paying attention knew these issues existed. You're telling me you analyzed all that data and you intended, yo, we're going to go before the Senate. We're going to bring these issues up and we're going to make sure they're addressed. But because a couple of people broke in and took selfies, nobody's getting charged with rape. There was no rapist involved. There was no crimes committed. Nothing needs to be examined because people broke through the door and took. What does one have to do with the other? How does your responsibility to examine that information dissipate because of um a riot? Call it a siege. Call it
Yeah.
them storming it. Okay, call it to frame it however you want. One doesn't have anything to do with the other. So I truly think, and there's footage of cops just letting people in.
Yeah, that was crazy. They
I
just
think that,
opened the gates and waved them in. That was
go
I
ahead.
never thought I'd see that shit. That was crazy.
And Pence put out a statement right before it was going down. Hey guys, I know you're all out there. Just as a heads up, um, I'm not going to be changing anything. Biden's going to be president. Wait a minute. How are you going to say that before you even examine any of the things? It's like, okay, it's like, hey, I'm in here and I don't have any panties on and I'm unarmed and there's nobody around for miles. Like what? Like this is like you're inciting rapists to come and rape. Okay. Well, the rapists are coming. Oh, because now we can't. No, one does have nothing to do with the other. Why wasn't that information examined? Why didn't those to the point where that dude they're calling for him to be a Hawley and Cruz? Like, nah, y'all gotta resign. Shyman and Schuster took away his book deal. It's like, wait a minute. They're examining potential voter fraud. So I think it's all rigged. It's all a dog and pony show.
Yep.
It's been rigged forever. It's not just Trump that it was rigged against. Voting literally doesn't matter. Just give up on it. It doesn't matter. Stop letting them get into your brain like a little earworm or whatever, and just or earwig or whatever it's called. They're burrowing into your head and they're infecting you with zombie tribalism that isn't teaching you how to grow food. It isn't teaching you how to get along with your neighbors. It's not teaching you how to actually solve problems in your life. All it is giving you is the pedigree to be cannon fodder for the disputes and machinations of the elite. And all you're doing is you're neglecting your homestead to help build their escape pod. And it's a waste of your time and energy. And all it does is make us hate each other on the internet. That's
Yep.
it.
Absolutely.
And disarms our critical thinking and corrupts our moral compass. Because if you can't be outraged at them spying on the president, but you're outraged about them bugging Bob Marley, then I don't know. I think your moral compass might be broken. If you're outraged that a rapist that had digitally penetrated, a la Joe Biden, a woman who called the cops on him, who fought with the cops and then went to grab a knife to kill the cops, if you can be outraged that the cops shot that digital penetrating knife wielding rapist, if that warrants your ire and outrage, but a veteran that broke a window at the Capitol, got shot in the neck and killed, who's unarmed,
Right.
that's
And
not
that's
police
somehow
brutality.
right. That's somehow acceptable. Oh well, she shouldn't have been there. She's a Trump supporter, so it is what it is. Like you people are fucking disgusting, yo. I can't
It,
deal
it
with it. I can't deal with none of them. It's
it's
horrible, bro.
it's absolutely incensed, and I think you've been a very patient man to work with me to work out all of this poison, and I have absolutely adopted your philosophy of, there's just certain things I'm just not going to engage with. There's no point because I find myself getting drug into the tribal outrage, and it's like, no, this is how it starts. This is how you infect me to be a zombie like you. No, I'm
Yep.
not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. And I'm not going to put it on par. Yes, the lady shouldn't have broken the window. I'm not going to argue about whether she should or shouldn't have been shot or not. It does seem a little extreme to me, but I'm not going to put that in the same realm as she punched a cop in the mouth after fleeing the scene of her rape victim and running to get a knife. That's just not in the same universe.
It's not. And anybody who wants to try to argue for one, it just tells me what you're really about when it comes down to it. It tells me that you're completely willing to shove objective truth and morality to the side to prove a point in an emotional moment. You just want to prove a point. You just want to make sure you get back at the people that you think have wronged you or however you want to put it. But I know
Right.
you don't care about what's objectively correct in these situations. And to me, that's poisonous. I can't have it. I can't have it in my psyche. I'm not willing to make those concessions. I would rather do everything that we've been talking about for the past year. I would rather invest in that and just debate people on the podcast about my usage of the word cult.
Right.
I'd rather do that than actually engage with y'all in real life about these politics and bullshit. I'm not doing it unless there's some type of way for me to monetize it and scale it. You got to come on the show, you got to talk there because I can record it and leave it for posterity, but I'm not using my real time
And
energy.
energy, yeah.
Fuck that, bro. Fuck that. I got better. I'd rather give my wife a foot massage. I got better shit I could be doing, bro. It's better shit I could be doing that's gonna objectively improve my life. What am I gonna do? Talk shit to you on Facebook because you posted some shit that I don't agree with? I don't give a shit. You're just not
yeah,
invited to the compound.
The only reason I could see it this like the more I pay attention to this stuff, the more I kind of understand the Essenes and the choice to be monastic, or the
Yeah,
Tibetan
yeah,
monks. Just, you know
yeah.
what, you guys are building Babylon. I see the principles that are involved. I see the way you abuse authority, and it's a game that I just don't want to play. I just so to the extent that I can flee from you and be isolated and be left alone, it's not a problem. The moment you try to invade Qumran, maybe we'll have to take up some swords and defend ourselves. But I have no interest in being a part of what you're building, because I see its inevitable collapse, and all of the tools that are needed to keep building it. Like, look, I'd rather build the pyramid than the skyscraper. You're not building in the flow of things. Like, you are subjecting nature and all the humans that are on the earth to this format that's unhealthy, not just for their bodies but for their psyches, for social interactions. Like, it's poison on absolutely every level. So the only reason I could see to have to get involved in anything political at this point is to the extent that it's going to affect my ability to craft my own Qumran. So when you start trying to really usher in like Chinese authoritarianism, and we're going to be going to labor camps and all this, at that point, it you may have to call me out of the cave, and I may have to show up and participate in some way, because if you are able to bring that into fruition, then I can't have what I have. It means you're
Right,
going to
right.
destroy everything that I'm trying to build. But to the extent that I can live separate from you and not get involved in this tribal outrage, feedback loop and the insanity that results from it, I don't care. I have no desire. I have no desire to participate at all. And I've seen through this last couple of years, um, it doesn't even matter if you agree on 5 or 6 different things out of 10. Whether you agree or have common ground doesn't matter. What matters is, are you of my same tribe? Because that's how I'm going to interpret your answers. And it really reminds me of exactly how like fundamentalist religion was. Like, as soon as you know like a person, like in Christianity, it's very big like that. Like, if I like, you could be a moral person, an immoral person. Do you have all of these intellectual assertions about the faith? Oh, I do. Okay, and this is this. Yes, this is this, and it says this. It says this. Okay, you're cool. Yeah, but what if I'm doing horrible things? Well, you said all the right things. I
Right.
don't need to evaluate you further than that. So you evaluate whether you even accept what the person is saying, or if they're sincere, or the substance. If you're going to give an honest ear to the substance at all, the first thing you want to know, well, do you believe exactly how I believe? That's the first thing. And everything from the conversation goes forward from there. And I've seen it where it's like, because I don't hate Trump, if I bring up a certain topic, like, yeah, I think China might have been behind the hack or blah blah, blah, you just trying to do that Trump propaganda, and then I'll see people have the exact same conversation, like, dude, cybersecurity is serious and blah blah blah. Wait a minute, how come when this dude brought it up, you're super interested in it, but when I bring it up, you think somehow like I'm trying to undermine you, or like I'm trying to evangelize you. No, like, this doesn't have anything to do with Trump. This has to do with like China's rise in prominence in the world, their position in the world, and the way they conduct themselves. Like, that's a concern. Like, I'm kind of concerned about that. Yeah, but you don't hate Trump as much as I hate Trump. So I am only concerned about that as much is if I know you hate Trump the way I hate Trump.
Right.
Then all of a sudden that same topic is of interest to me. It's worth looking into. That's the
Ev-
thing.
Eventually, we'll all get to the same crossroads. Like I feel like it kind of happened recently with all the food growing and the permaculture shit that I'm doing here on the property. As you can imagine, my property looks nothing like the rest of the woods around me. Everybody has really manicured grass. They don't have any trees in their front yard, other than a palm tree or some shit like that. I got coconut trees and all kinds of shit growing. So For a long time, most of my neighbors thought I was a nut job. They can, complain to other neighbors and they would say shit about, how come I don't have grass and all kinds of shit. But once this thing happened and people were being kept out of work and they're thinking about food security and all of that,
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden my yard don't look unmanicured no more. It's not an eyesore anymore. Now you're looking at these trees and it's making perfect sense. It's looking like security. It's looking like, this guy has a plan. And I didn't have to say anything. Nothing changed. The world changed around my garden and changed the perspective of it. So I feel the same way about everything else. I'll meet you there. You're gonna get there eventually, and I'm already gonna be there. I'll have my foundation laid down. I'll have shit growing. We're gonna have a fire started. We're gonna have our feet kicked up. We're gonna be taking mushrooms and drinking kombucha and shit. We're gonna be chilling. But these people are gonna come to the same conclusions, and they're gonna look at us and be like, "How can we learn this?" Or shit'll be so bad they'll try to bum rush the fucking compound, and we'll have to cap their asses. I don't know. This depends on how fast the decline happens. But either way, I'm invested in what I'm invested in, and I'm not worrying about what is essentially a counterproductive, counterintuitive, self destructive system that people are fighting to stay connected to. I'm just not going to do it. I refuse. That's not my work. My work is not to try to pull people and wrestle them away from committing suicide, which is basically what they're doing, committing psychological suicide. I'm not going to wrestle the blade out of your hand so you don't chop your own foot off. I refuse. If you come up to me and you're like, "Hey, I've been thinking about cutting my own foot off," we can have a conversation. But if you're committed to it, I'm not going to try to wrestle that shit out of your hand. I got plants to grow. I got other people that actually want to talk and build and heal and shit like that. I'm committed to that. If this is what you want and you think this is the best way for you to move forward, go for it. I got nothing else for you, bro, other than leading by example. I feel like that's the best work that I can do. And when you see me radiating happiness and self love and compassion, and you're wondering why I'm glowing the way I'm glowing, you're going to be like, "Hey, buddy, are you a billionaire? Why you look so happy when the world is so fucked?" Right? Listen, I invested in the right shit. How come you got $100 million and you're contemplating suicide because you got so much anxiety? You know what I'm saying? All of this shit, you taking drugs and shit and antipsychotics because you just can't fix your inner dialogue, your inner monologue. You can't fix the mind and the spirit. There's something else to be done. So that's what I'm investing in. And I can still use that position. I feel like that's the easiest way also for me to get to where I can generate revenue with creativity and shit like that is by completely unplugging from all this other bullshit. My mind has to be clear to be able to create and be able to partake in all of this stuff without being worried and without being stressed out about bills and shit like that. I got to disconnect from it. And the healthiest I've ever been in my life was once I disconnected from it and put my energy into the tools and the rituals and the
Mm-hmm.
exercises and shit that I felt like was going to help me improve. That's what helped me. It wasn't the news. It wasn't whether I was watching Fox or CNN. That didn't do it. That wasn't it for me. And I know that's anecdotal evidence, right? I get it. That's why I'm not trying to debate with anybody. I'm going to lead by example. I'm going to be the thing that I think is lacking in the world instead of pointing fingers at other people and how come they do. No, I'm going to be that. If something is grinding my gears about the world, I feel like it's not enough of something, I need to contribute to make sure there's at least a little bit more of it. And
Absolutely.
that's as far as I'm willing to go. I don't think it's anybody else's job. It's not a billionaire's job to stop making plastic so we can stop throwing it in the ocean and killing dolphins and shit like that. It's my job to put myself in position to create a system where I can at least contribute more hemp plastic so people have a choice of which one they want to choose from, or invest in companies that are forward thinking and like that. That's my
For
job.
sure.
That's where I'm at. So I'm not trying to put nobody else in the crosshairs. Anything that I can do to improve the situation and show other people that the situation can be improved in an alternative way, that's my work.
And
Period.
and really is wisdom to recognize the finite energy that you have and to also make the conscious decision that other people would be missing out on what you could be contributing to them
Right.
because you're wasting your energy in these frivolous ways that that it's basically designed to keep you locked into that. Like you watch CNN, you watch Fox News, you watch MSNBC, you're in the loop and you know what's going on, but what does that really do? It's basically just them rallying you to their cause, and their cause is for you to consent for them to have more power. But the track record shows nobody is going to use that power for anything productive,
Yeah.
to solve any real problems. So, I mean, I it comes to a point where, not to sound too stolen legacy juicy, but you know, return on investment.
Right.
What am I really getting out of it? So you see that you've been caught up in another. Yeah, you got plenty of money, right? You got money. You could pay $5,000 for the loaf of bread, but you can't make any of your own food. You can't find any sort of peace of mind. Like you can't relate to people in a healthy way. You've allowed yourself to kind of be cultivated into this like polite animalistic kind of creature, where you know how to navigate in everything in a way that seems really civilized and really polite, but really it's cutthroat, it's irresponsible, it's destructive, not just to the environment, but to people's souls and well-being. And you've learned how to succeed under that paradigm, but you're not happy, you're not fulfilled, you're not at peace. So
Right.
what's the return on investment if I spend all my time debating you to try to correct you on little points, which I already acknowledged in my observation, that you're tribally devoted to certain conclusions anyway. There's not any piece of information I'm going to present you that you're going to take in objectively anyway. So you're hell bent on wielding this knife and cutting off your leg, and I don't want to get cut up. I don't want to get cut up trying to save you. But
Yeah.
but yeah.
And I can't guarantee that this is not the best thing that could possibly happen to you. Who am
That's
I to get
harsh.
in the way
Yeah.
of your realization that I probably shouldn't have done that? Right? Because if I stop you from cutting your foot off, who knows what path that could send you down?
Right.
Who knows what path that could send you down? That can make you worse. Maybe you need to lose a foot right here at this juncture so you can move forward and have a different type of realization. I'm not getting in the way of that because there's too many variables in the universe. If you come to me, I'll tell you the absolute truth. I'll give you the best possible advice I can give you. But the rest is up to you. I'm definitely not trying to force nobody into what I think they should be. I don't know. Fuck that, bro. That's not my business. That's not my business. And that's what I see everywhere on social media. That's what I see with these politics. People are choosing anxiety. They're choosing to, dabble with depression because they can't believe the word blah blah blah. But they won't turn it off. They won't turn it off. They'll keep consuming it, keep drinking it while it's rotting a hole in your gut. But they're just gonna keep drinking it. Like I can't help you, bro. I cannot help you. If this truly is what you want to do and this is how you want to be aligned, that's totally got to be your business, top to bottom. That's completely up to you. I got nothing else to do with it.
Yeah,
So
that's you might want to update the doc with that metaphor. I can't stop you from cutting off your own foot. Like if you want that
yeah,
that's
that was going into the to the manifesto right there.
yeah, that's a brilliant illustration, man.
Yeah, I can't do it. So basically, anybody who wants to contribute to the compound, anybody who's listening, definitely go to sweetco.art, SWTKO.art. That's where all our stuff is right now. And anything that you purchase from there is going to go towards helping us build this place where we can fulfill our healing. This is all our jobs is to heal ourselves. We're cult leaders. We must be cultivation leaders in the cultivation of our higher selves. That's our job here is to be the best that we can possibly be because everybody who's going to need us is going to need us at our best. So it's our job to
Mm.
be at our best. So if that resonates with you, if you feel like that, holler at sweetcode.art. And everything is going towards the big picture. It's happening. It's happening. It sounds crazy to some people. To a lot of people, it sounds like it makes perfect sense. But in a couple years from now, you just see. You just see, because that is literally at the top of my vision board for good at this point. I'm not straying away from that concept, that idea. It's metaphysics, so we fucked. It's the only path forward. And if you don't believe that now, just be patient. Just be
It
patient.
will become evident.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we will have at the very least, we'll have a curriculum for you. You know what I mean? It's going to cost, but we'll have it for you. You can still get the podcast for free. You can scroll through those and glean all the jewels you can possibly get from them. But the ceremonies on site and the curriculum is definitely going to cost you. I mean, it's a business. We got to sustain ourselves. So just link up, make it happen, and come chill with us. It's
Dope
obviously the
speaks.
future. Obviously the future.
Yeah, just get on board because what is now is just not working.
It's
It's
not.
just and if what we've come to, especially if you live in America at this point, like if this is what it culminates into, like we've been progressing and moving forward supposedly, and like this has become the end result, that we're not solving any problems, we're all at each other's throat, and the people that have money continue to get more, and the people that don't are struggling to find ways to obtain it. That's something that I I can't see any justification for anybody wanting to continue to prop that up unless you're at the top of the pyramid. And if you would feel comfortable being at the top of the pyramid under that circumstances and on the back of that much human suffering, you're not the kind of person that, could I don't think could ever be happy with themselves, or I'd want to know.
Right. Right. It's a done deal. I know what my work is. I know what my plan is. I'm sticking to it. And there's nothing happening in that simulation that is attractive to me. So it's just this is it, dude. I mean, it literally started as a joke. We were laughing about it when we first started this podcast. You know what I'm saying? We were kind of flirting with the idea and laughing about it. But as time went on, it started to just crystallize itself into just absolute undeniable truth. So I'm not even gonna I ain't even playing with it no more, dude. I'm for real, for real. I'm for real, for real. And I'm glad. I'm happy to be here. It's not even a point of one of those the anxiety thing, like, oh no, what are we gonna do? It's like, of course this is what we're gonna do. This is clearly the best decision. You know what I'm saying? It's the best decision for all the positives. That's not even factoring in the broken, counterintuitive negatives that we've accepted as regular life. Without before I even factor any of that in, just the positives is enough to keep it on the top of my vision board. So I already won, as far as I'm concerned, anyway.
Nope, you absolutely have. And I feel super amounts of gratitude, and I feel really inspired to definitely get to work, man.
Yeah, yeah.
Get the
And when you
documents.
got to do this
Yeah.
work at the place, hit me up because you know what I'm saying. You won't have to dig up your yard, but I could definitely come bring you some of the permaculture wisdom over here because we've been trial and error for the last 6 years, so I can definitely save you some time, man.
Oh,
Keep me
dude,
in the loop.
I've ruined a huge swath of the yard. So and it and it did probably irreparable damage to some of my vertebrae. Like when
Mm.
they when future generations find my bones, you
Like,
know,
what the hell was this guy doing?
no, you get to like. I remember reading about that and being like, "Wow!" So is that like they could tell, like when they were taking up the remains of people in Pompeii? They find those like crystallized kind of cadavers,
Yeah,
from where the ash falls on them. Like they could figure out who were the slaves and who were the well-to-do people based on their vertebrae. Like this person was clearly doing back-breaking work. This person's spine is completely intact. They didn't have to lift anything. I'm like, wow,
yeah.
wow. Future generations will know I had no idea what I was doing when I first started the permaculture.
Hey, listen, I think it's fair. We none of us have any idea what we're doing. They've been telling us some backward shit for a long time. But yeah, dude, even if it's just a quick, shoot me a quick text. You know what I mean? Shoot,
Before you ruin
I'll
your
get,
yard.
yeah, I'll
Yeah.
get you. But the good thing is that nature recovers quick. So you didn't really damage it too much. You might have slowed down some of the overall progress of what you want to do, but you didn't. It's not damaged. It's not damaged at all. So
Yeah,
you'll get
I'm
all
gonna
that
go.
microbiology activity back in no time.
I'm gonna cut some tree branches down. I'm gonna rake the leaves and the lawn clippings. I'm gonna throw it all over to the scorched earth that I made, and I'll toss out. There'll be no more vegetable waste going in the garbage.
There you go.
That's all going to be compiled, and yeah, man, just start building up the soil. And what a dope metaphor. That's got to make its way into the text as well, man. Just when you think about what you're doing, I mean, even in your own person, like people have goals and they got things that they want to do, and you think your job is just to go out and do it, and you don't even examine yourself first. Like, yo, are these things that you want to do? Like, could those things even take place and take root based on the kind of soil you're working with right
Right,
now? Like,
right,
if you change the things in your psychology and your attitude about things, that all these things that you think that you want, like, are you even going to be equipped to sustain them and nurture them in a
right.
real way? Because I could hand you all those things that you want, but if it's going onto a particular kind of soil, it's gonna absolutely wither, you know,
Absolutely.
and you're
100%. 100%. I completely agree. We have to put ourselves in alignment with the soil itself. You know what I'm saying? Because we can attach shit to ourselves. We can try to create situations and create opportunities. But if you yourself are not in the right state of being, if you don't have the right energetic alignment, none of that shit's gonna work. You could throw a handful of seeds out on top of the soil. That don't mean they're gonna grow, even though those seeds have everything inside them encoded in them to make sure that they do grow. If they're not in the right environment, it's waste. It's waste. It's worthless.
I think a lot of us are plastic Christmas trees. You know what I'm saying? There's no roots, there's no life, it can't be sustained, but it looks really good. We
Mm,
have all the ornaments, we have all the accoutrements, but it's nothing that can feed us or sustain us. It
mm.
doesn't even give off the right smell. It's just plastic, or a
Wow.
dead Christmas tree. It's brown, but you decorate it with so many ornaments, and these lives that we're trying to build, they don't have any roots, they don't have any life, they don't have any real sustainability, but they look super shiny. They're super shiny.
Fire hazard. So fucking fire hazard.
Modern
We need
life is a fire hazard.
Yeah, we need
Yeah,
some
that's it.
transmutation, bro. That's it. And we are gonna have transmutation courses, energy transmutation courses at the compound. So keep that in mind. We're gonna have everything you need. Yeah, man. I'm gonna wrap it up and get it here and find myself some grub for the night. I'm probably gonna
For
have a
sure.
nice cup of tea and kick back and find something to watch that's not too damaging to my brain. I'm thinking about starting Blacklist over again. That show was awesome. So I don't know. We'll see. I'll figure something out, but it's definitely a lounge night.
Beautiful. All right, my brother, always a pleasure, man. We'll link up soon.
Definitely great talking to you, bro. Bless.
Always. Peace.
Peace.